What's the Use of Poetry? By Richard Le Gallienne. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Adrian Stevens.
Craig Franklin.
Sonia.
Thomas Peter.
And Jason in Canada.
What's the use of poetry? And idly tuneful, the loquacious throng flutter and twitter, prodigal of time, and little masters make a toy of song, till grave men weary of the sound of rhyme. William Watson in Wadsworth's Grave. There is no doubt that many, one might almost say most, people are firmly convinced that they do not care for poetry. They have no use for it, they tell you. Either it bores them as a fantastic, high-flown method of saying something that, to their way of thinking, could be better said in plain prose, or they look upon it as the sentimental nonsense of the moonstruck and lovesick young, a kind of intellectual candy, all very well for women and children, but of no value to grown men with the serious work of the world on their shoulders. It is not at all difficult to account for, and indeed to sympathise with this attitude. To begin with, of course, there is a large class outside our present considerations which does not care for poetry, simply because it does not care for any literature whatsoever. Serious reading of any kind does not enter into its scheme of life. Beyond the newspapers and magazines and an occasional novel of the hour, idly taken up and indifferently put aside, it has no literary needs. With this listless multitude we have not to concern ourselves, but rather with that sufficiently heterogeneous body known as the reading public, the people for whom Mr. Carnegie builds libraries, and the publishers display their wares. Of course, among these there must necessarily be a considerable percentage temperamentally unappreciative of poetry, just as there are numbers of people born with no ear for music, and numbers, again, born with no colour sense. The lover of poetry is no less born than the poet himself, yet, as the poet is made as well as born, so is his reader, and there are many who really love poetry without knowing it, but who think they do not care for it, either because they have contracted the wrong notion of what poetry is, or because they have some time or other made a bad start with the wrong kind. I am convinced that one widespread provocative of the prevailing impression of the foolishness of poetry is the mediocre magazine verse of the day. In an age when we go so much to the magazines for our reading, we may rely on finding there the best work being done in every branch of literature except the highest. The best novelists, the best historians, and the best essayists write for the magazines, but the best poets must be looked for in their high-priced volumes, and a magazine reader must rely for his verse on lady amateurs and tuneful college boys. Thus he too often approaches poetry not through the great masters but through the little misses, and he forms his naturally contemptuous notion of poetry from feeble echoes and insipid imitations. No wonder, therefore, that he should refuse to waste his good eyesight on anything in the shape of verse, and should conceive of poetry as a mild mental dissipation for young ladies, a sickly sweetmeat made of molasses and moonshine. If the magazine editors of the world would only bind themselves to publish no verse except the best, and, failing to obtain a contemporary supply of the best, would fill their spare corners of space with reprints of the old fine things, I am convinced that they would do a great deal toward rectifying this widespread misconception of an art which, far from being trivial and superficial, is, of all the arts, the most serious and most vitally human. I am not saying that all poetry is for all readers. There is a section of poetry which has been called poet's poetry, which of necessity can appeal only to those in whom the sense of beauty and verbal exquisiteness has become specialized. Spenser and Keats, for example, are poets of the rainbow. For the average reader, their poems are the luxuries rather than the necessities of literature, though, in making a distinction so rough and ready, it must not be forgotten that beauty happily, is becoming more and more a general necessity, nor must it be forgotten either that rainbows, refined and remote as they are, belong also to the realities. It is the reality of poetry that I wish, if possible, to bring home to readers in this article. Some flowers, says George Meredith, have roots deep as oaks. Poetry is one of those flowers, and instead of its being a superficial decoration of life, it is, rightly understood, the organic expression of life's deepest meaning, the essence in words of human dreams and human action. It is the truth of life told beautifully, and yet truthfully.
There is only one basis for the longevity of human forms. That basis is reality. No other form of human expression has continued with such persistent survival from the beginning until now as poetry. From the Iliad to the absent-minded beggar, it and the wild flowers, for all their adventurous fragility, are as old and no less stable than the hills, and for the same reason, because they are no less real. The world is apt to credit prose with a greater reality than poetry, but the truth is that the prose of life is real only in proportion as it is vitalized by the spirit of poetry that breathes in all created things. Life exacts practical reasons for the survival of all its forms of expression, and, unless poetry served some practical purpose of existence, it would long since have perished. It is because poetry has a practical work to do in the world that it continues, and will continue to exist, because it is one of the motive forces of the universe. Life's motive meaning, one might almost say, the nerve force of existence. A great man has defined it as the finest spirit of all knowledge, and the phrase, though limited, may help us to a broader and deeper apprehension of poetry, and help us to say too that poetry is the finer spirit of all impulse, the finer meaning of all achievement. There is no human interest desiring to be displayed in all its essential vividness that does not realize the value of a poetical expression. Those who would depreciate the power of poetry in the sternest practical affairs have only to be reminded how much modern imperialism owes to Rudyard Kipling, and it is by no means trivial to remark that the most successful advertisements have been in verse. So soon as poetry, so-called, really is poetry, its appeal is immediately admitted and its force undeniably felt. It is the false poets who account for the false ideas of poetry. One has only to confront a practical man with the real thing to convince him that, without realizing it, he has cared a great deal about poetry all his life. Probably he has imagined that this great stumbling block has been the verse. Why not say it in plain English, he has impatiently exclaimed, thinking all the time of bad verse, of lifeless, contorted rhyming, and of those metrical inanities of the magazines. And yet, when you bring him a verse that is really alive, in which the metre is felt to be the very life-beat of the thought, you don't find him asking to have it turned into prose. How about Mandalay in prose, for example, or that old bugle call of Scott's? Sound, sound the clarion, fill the fife, to all the sensual world proclaim, one crowded hour of glorious life is worth an age without a name. Or Tennyson's tears, idle tears, or Coleridge's, he prayeth best who loveth best all things both great and small, for the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. Or the quality of mercy is not strained, or under the greenwood tree, or Mr. Swinburne's ask nothing more of me, sweet, all I can give you I give, heart of my heart, were it more, more would be laid at your feet, love that should help you to live, song that should spur you to soar. In all these cases, the verse is immediately felt to be the very life of the expression, for the reason that it echoes in words the life rhythms to which, unconsciously, all such human emotions keep time. Say it in prose. Can you say a trumpet in prose, or a tear, or a butterfly? If you can, your prose is really poetry, and will be found to be eloquent with sunken rhythms not immediately obvious to the ear and eye.
The first thing to realize about poetry is that the meter is the meaning, even more than the words. In Tennyson's sad "Tears, idle tears," for example, it is not so much the words that are accountable for the wistful sorrow of the general effect, as the sad, rain-like melody mysteriously charging the words with sorrow, like some beautiful interpretative voice; and it is this subtly mimetic quality, endlessly adaptable, which is the raison d'être of metre, and the secret of its power over mankind. Perhaps it may help us to attempt here a definition of poetry, though it is a bold, even foolhardy thing to do, for there has never yet been a definition of poetry that satisfied any one but the man who made it. We may recall one fashionable in its day. Matthew Arnold's "Poetry is a criticism of life." That a poet should have made such a harrowing definition is amazing, though one, of course, understands it in the light of the fact that the inspiration of Matthew Arnold's muse was almost entirely that of a philosophical criticism of life. Far from being a criticism of life, poetry is much more like a recreation of it. It is life, in words. But let me timidly launch my own definition. Poetry is that impassioned arrangement of words, whether in verse or prose, which embodies the exaltation, the beauty, the rhythm, and the pathetic truth of life. There is a motive idealism behind all human action of which most of us are unconscious, or to which we ordinarily give but little thought; a romance of impulse which is the real significance of human effort. The walls of Thebes were built to music, according to the old story, but so were the walls of every other city that has ever been built. The skyscrapers of New York are soaring to music also, a masterful music of the future, which not all can hear, and of which, perhaps, the music makers themselves are most ignorant of all. Once more, in Emerson's immortal phrase, the builders are building better than they know, these ruthless speculators and stern business men, who are the last to suspect themselves of the poetry which they involuntarily serve. Human life, in the main, is thus unconsciously poetical, and moves to immortal measures of a mysterious spiritual music. It is this impassioned exaltation, this strange rhythm, this spiritual beauty, the finer spirit of life, which the poet seizes on and expresses, and therewith also that pathos which seems to inhere in all created things. We read him because he gives that value of life which we feel belongs to it, but for which we are unable to find the words ourselves. How often one has heard people say, on reading a poem, "Why, that is just what I have always felt, but could never express," and the exclamation was obviously a recognition of the truth of the poem. The poet had made a true observation, and recorded it with all the vividness of truth. It is the business of the poet to be all the time thus recording and recreating life in all its manifestations, not only for those who already possess something of the poetic vision, yet lack the poetic utterance, but also for those who need to be awakened to the ideal meanings and issues of life. Poetry is thus seen to be a kind of lay religion, revealing and interpreting the varied beauty and nobility of life.
But a better way than theorizing to show the use, the sweet uses, of poetry, is to call up the names of some of the great poets, and ponder what they have meant, and still mean, in the life of humanity. Dante, Milton, and Wordsworth, for example, and to them we might add Tennyson, Browning, and Matthew Arnold. How much these 6 poets alone have meant to the graver life of humanity, the life of religion, of thought, of conduct. Particularly with regard to the 4 poets of the last century, we are compelled to note how, far more than any professed teachers and thinkers, They were the teachers and thinkers of their age, and did indeed mould the thought of their century. For how many have Wordsworth's Prelude, Tennyson's In Memoriam, Browning's Rabbi Ben Ezra, and Matthew Arnold's Empedocles been literally sacred books, books of daily exercise and meditation, to name only a few of their more typical poems. They are well worn today, but think what forces in the world these lines of Wordsworth have been. The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. Tennyson says, "Are God and nature then at strife, that nature lends such evil dreams? So careful of the type she seems, so careless of the single life, that I, considering everywhere her secret meaning in her deeds, and finding that of 50 seeds she often brings but one to bear, I falter where I firmly trod, and falling with my weight of cares upon the great world's altar stairs that slope through darkness up to God, I stretch lame hands of faith, and grope and gather dust and chaff, and call to what I feel is Lord of all, and faintly trust the larger hope." I quote this from Matthew Arnold. "It is so small a thing to have enjoyed the sun, to have lived light in the spring, to have loved, to have thought, to have done, to have advanced true friends, and beat down baffling foes, that we must feign a bliss of doubtful future date, and while we dream on this, lose all our present state, and relegate to worlds yet distant our repose." These lines, and many more like them that one could quote, have done definite spiritual service for mankind, have inspired countless men and women with new faith, new hope, and new fortitude, and will remain permanent springs of sustenance for the human spirit. Again, the mere mention of such names as Goethe, Byron, and Shelley carries with it their tremendous significance in the practical life of the modern world. When we think of such figures as occur over and over again in the history of poetry, we realize that Tennyson's "one poor poet's scroll" that shook the world was no mere boyish inflation of the poet's mission. That sad musical poet, Arthur O'Shaughnessy, said no more than the truth when he sang, in verse like the motion of moonlight on water, "We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers, and sitting by desolate streams, world losers and world forsakers, on whom the pale moon gleams, yet we are the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems." To realize what a sheerly political force poetry has been in America alone, one has only to recall the poems of Whittier and Lowell, Poe and Longfellow, and Julia Ward Howe's immortal Battle Hymn of the Republic. But apart from such strenuous and stern services, how many other services no less valuable has poetry rendered to mankind, services of joy and universal sympathy. The poet, often so sad himself, sings all men's joys and sorrows as if they were his own, and there is nothing that can happen to us, nothing we can experience, no stroke of fate, and no mood of heart or mind that we cannot find expressed and interpreted for us somewhere in some poet's book. Take but one poet, Robert Burns, for instance, and think of the immense addition to the sum total of human pleasure and human consolation that his handful of Scotch songs has made. Who asks, "What's the use of poetry?" when he joins in Auld Lang Syne, and feels his heart stirred to its tearful depths with the sentiment of human brotherhood, and the almost tragic dearness of friends? And who that has ever been in love has not once in his life felt the brotherly hand of a fellow experience in "Had we never loved sae kindly, had we never loved sae blindly, never met, or never parted, we had ne'er been broken-hearted," and been consoled somehow with that mysterious consolation which belongs to the perfect expression of sorrow?
If the simple songs of a Scotch peasant have been of so much use to the world, what of that lordly pleasure house of Shakespeare? Think of the boundless universe of mere delight that has written over its door, "The works of Shakespeare." The laughter, the wisdom, the beauty, the all-comprehending humanity. If it be of no use to make men happy, to quicken in them the joy of life, to heighten their pleasures, to dry their tears, to bind up their wounds; if it be of no use to teach them wisdom, to open their eyes, to purify and direct their spirits, to gird them to fight, to brace them to endure, to teach them to be gentle, then, indeed, we may ask, what's the use of poetry? But, while poetry can do all these things, I think it must be allowed by the most practical that it has a very important part to play in the work of the world. To end, as I began, with that practical man who imagines that he does not care for poetry, I gave one or two explanations of his distaste. But there is one other important one that must not be forgotten. He begins too often with "Paradise Lost." I mean that he too often attempts some tough classic before he is ready for it, and, because he cannot read Milton with pleasure, imagines that he does not care for poetry at all. Thus he finds himself bewildered by the insipid magazine muses on the one hand, and the unscalable immortals on the other. Too many make the famous Mr. Boffin's mistake of beginning the study of English literature with Gibbon's Decline and Fall, and what wonder if a man beginning the study of English poetry with Browning's Sordello should imagine, like Douglas Jerrold in the story, either that his mind was failing him, or that there was something radically wrong with the poet. Actually, a man may love poetry very deeply, and care nothing at all for Paradise Lost. He may also find nothing for him in Homer, or Aeschylus, or Dante, or Goethe. The great architectural works of such masters may seem too godlike and grim for his gentler human need. But give him a handful of violets from Ophelia's grave, or a bunch of Herrick's daffodils, or take him out under the sky where Shelley's lark is singing, or try him with a lyric of Heine's, or some ballad of old unhappy far off things and battles long ago, and you will see whether or not he loves poetry. The mistake is in thinking that all poetry is for all readers. On the contrary, the realm of poetry is as wide as the world, for the very reason that each man may find there just what he needs and leave the rest. The thing is to discover the poetry that was meant for us, and perhaps the best way to do that is to turn over the pages of some well-made selection and see where our eyes yet caught and held. Palgrave's Golden Treasury is, of course, the classical anthology, a little volume filled with the purest gold of English lyrical poetry. Footnote: The Golden Treasury, when it was published more than 40 years ago, was certainly the finest anthology that had been made in England, and it still holds its place as a very choice collection of British poets, small and select. End of footnote. If a man should read in that for an hour and find nothing to his taste, it is to be feared that he was born deaf to the sweet rippling of the Pierian spring. But, as I have said, I believe that few have been so hardly treated by nature. A poet died young in every one of us, said someone. I think he did not so much die as fall asleep, nor is he so fast asleep but that the right song, sung right, would awaken him. What is the use of poetry? It is just the whole use of living, and let anyone who doubts it enter the garden for himself. Ay, come ye hither to this pleasant land, for here in truth are vines of Engaddi, here golden urns of manna to thy hand, and rocks whence honey flows deliciously, udders from which comes frothing copiously the milk of life, ears filled with sweetest grains, and fig trees knowing no sterility. Here paradisal streams make rich the plains. Oh, come and bathe therein, ye world-worn weary swains. Richard Le Gallienne. End of What's the Use of Poetry by Richard Le Gallienne. This recording is in the public domain.
To the Spring, from Hymns of Astrea, in acrostic verse by Sir John Davis. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. To the Spring. Earth now is green and heaven is blue, lively spring which makes all new. Early spring doth enter, jolly spring doth enter, sweet young sunbeams do subdue angry aged winter. Blasts are mild and seas are calm, every meadow flows with balm, the earth wears all her riches, harmonious birds sing such a psalm as ear and heart bewitches. Reserve, sweet spring, this nymph of ours, eternal garlands of thy flowers. Green garlands never wasting, in her shall last our state's fair spring, now and for ever flourishing, as long as heaven is lasting. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Mary Stuart by Pierre de Ronsard, translated from the French by Louise Stuart Costello. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. To Mary Stuart. All beauty granted as a boon to earth, that is, has been, or ever can have birth, compared to hers, is void, and nature's care ne'er formed a creature so divinely fair. In spring amidst the lilies she was born, and purer tints her peerless face adorn. And though Adonis' blood the rose may paint, beside her bloom the rose's hues are faint. With all his richest store love decked her eyes, the Graces each, those daughters of the skies, strove which should make her to the world's most dear, and to attend her left their native sphere. The day that was to bear her far away, why was I mortal to behold that day? Oh, had I senseless grown, nor heard, nor seen, or that my eyes a ceaseless fount had been, that I might weep, as weep amidst their bowers the nymphs, when winter winds have cropped their flowers, or when rude torrents the clear streams deform, or when the trees are riven by the storm. Or rather, would I some bird had been, still to be near her in each changing scene, still on the highest mast to watch all day, and like a star to mark her vessel's way. The dangerous billows past, on shore, on sea, near that dear face it still were mine to be. O France, where are thy ancient champions gone? Roland, Rinaldo, is there living none her steps to follow, and her safety guard, and deem her lovely looks their best reward, which might subdue the pride of mighty Jove, to leave his heaven and languish for her love? No fault is hers, but in her royal state, for simple love dreads to approach the great. He flies from regal pomp, that treacherous snare, where truth unmarked may wither in despair. Wherever destiny her path may lead, fresh springing flowers will bloom beneath her tread. All nature will rejoice, the waves be bright, the tempest check its fury at her sight, the sea be calm, her beauty to behold. The sun shall crown her with his rays of gold, unless he fears, should he approach her throne, her majesty should quite eclipse his own. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To the Lord General Cromwell by John Milton. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. To the Lord General Cromwell. Cromwell, our chief of men, who through a cloud, not of war only, but detractions rude, guided by faith and matchless fortitude, to peace and truth thy glorious way hast ploughed, and on the neck of crowned fortune proud hast reared God's trophies, and his work pursued, while Darwen's stream with blood of Scots imbued, and Dunbar field resounds thy praises loud, and Worcester's laureate wreath. Yet much remains to conquer still. Peace hath her victories no less renowned than war. New foes arise, threatening to bind our souls with secular chains. Help us to save free conscience from the paw of hireling wolves, whose gospel is their maw. Milton. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Oh, breathe not his name. Robert Emmet. By Thomas Moore. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. Oh, breathe not his name. Robert Emmet. Oh, breathe not his name. Let it sleep in the shade, where cold and unhonored his relics are laid. Sad, silent, and dark be the tears that we shed, as the night dew that falls on the grave over his head. But the night dew that falls, though in silence it weeps, shall brighten with verdure the grave where he sleeps, and the tear that we shed, though in secret it rolls, shall long keep his memory green in our souls. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Charles XII. From The Vanity of Human Wishes, by Dr. Samuel Johnson. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. Charles XII. From The Vanity of Human Wishes. On what foundation stands the warrior's pride? How just his hopes, let Swedish Charles decide. A frame of adamant, a soul of fire, no dangers fright him, and no labours tire. Over love, o'er fear, extends his wide domain, unconquered lord of pleasure and of pain. No joys to him pacific sceptres yield, war sounds the trump, he rushes to the field. Behold surrounding kings their power combine, and one capitulate, and one resign. Peace courts his hand, but spreads her charms in vain. Think nothing gained, he cries, till naught remain On Moscow's walls till Gothic standards fly, And all be mine beneath the polar sky. The march begins in military state, And nations on his eye suspended wait. Stern famine guards the solitary coast, And winter barricades the realms of frost. He comes, nor want nor cold his course delay. Hide, blushing glory, hide Poltova's day. The vanquished hero leaves his broken bands, And shows his misery in distant lands. Condemned a needy supplicant to wait, While ladies interpose, and slaves debate. But did not chance at length her error mend? Did not subverted empire mark his end? Did rival monarchs give the fatal wound, Or hostile millions press him to the ground? His fall was destined to a barren strand, A petty fortress, and a dubious hand. He left the name, at which the world grew pale, To point a moral, or adorn a tale. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Napoleon by Victor Hugo, translated from the French by Fraser's Magazine. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Napoleon. Tu domines notre âge, ange ou démon, qu'importe. Angel or demon, thou, whether of light, the minister, or darkness, still dost sway this age of ours. Thine eagle's soaring flight bears us, all breathless, after it away. The eye that from thy presence fain would stray shuns thee in vain. Thy mighty shadow thrown rests on all pictures of the living day, and on the threshold of our time alone, dazzling yet sombre, stands thy form, Napoleon. Thus, when the admiring stranger's steps explore the subject lands that 'neath Vesuvius be, whether he wind along the enchanting shore to Portici from fair Parthenope, or, lingering long in dreamy reverie, o'er loveliest Ischia's odorous isle he stray, wooed by whose breath the soft and amorous sea seems like some languishing sultana's lay, a voice for very sweets that scarce can win its way. Him, whether Paestum's solemn fane detain, shrouding his soul with meditation's power, or at Pozzuoli to the sprightly strain of Tarantella dance 'neath Tuscan tower, listening he while away the evening hour, or wake the echoes, mournful, lone, and deep, of that sad city in its dreaming bower by the volcano seized, where mansions keep the likeness which they wore at that last fatal sleep. Or be his bark at Posilippo laid, while as the swarthy boatman at his side chants Tasso's lays to Virgil's pleased shade, ever he sees throughout that circuit wide, from shaded nook or sunny lawn espied, from rocky headland viewed, or flowery shore, from sea and spreading mead alike descried, the giant mount, towering all objects o'er, and blackening with its breath the horizon evermore. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Napoleon, from Childe Harold, Canto 3 by Lord Byron. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Napoleon. There sunk the greatest, nor the worst of men, whose spirit antithetically mixed, one moment of the mightiest, and again on little objects with like firmness fixed. Extreme in all things hadst thou been betwixt. Thy throne had still been thine, or never been. For daring made thy rise as fall, thou seekest even now to reassume the imperial mien, and shake again the world, the thunderer of the scene. Conqueror and captive of the earth art thou, she trembles at thee still, and thy wild name was ne'er more bruited in men's minds than now, that thou art nothing save the jest of fame, who wooed thee once thy vassal, and became the flatterer of thy fierceness, till thou wert a god unto thyself, nor less the same, to the astounded kingdoms all inert, who deemed thee for a time whate'er thou didst assert. O more or less than man in high or low, battling with nations flying from the field, now making monarchs' necks thy footstool, now more than thy meanest soldiers taught to yield. An empire thou couldst crush, command, rebuild, but govern not thy pettiest passion, nor, however deeply in men's spirits skilled, look through thine own, nor curb the lust of war, nor learn that tempted fate will leave the loftiest star. Yet well thy soul hath brooked the turning tide, with that untaught innate philosophy, which, be it wisdom, coldness, or deep pride, is gall and wormwood to an enemy. When the whole host of hatred stood hard by, to watch and mock thee shrinking, thou hadst smiled with a sedate and all-enduring eye. When fortune fled her spoiled and favourite child, he stood unbowed beneath the ills upon him piled. Sager than in thy fortunes, for in them ambition steal thee on too far to show that just habitual scorn which could contemn men and their thoughts. 'Twas wise to feel not so, to wear it ever on thy lip and brow, and spurn the instruments thou wert to use, till they were turning unto thine overthrow. 'Tis but a worthless world to win or lose, so hath it proved to thee and all such lot who choose. If, like a tower upon a headlong rock, thou hadst been made to stand or fall alone, such scorn of man had helped to brave the shock. But men's thoughts were the steps which paved thy throne, their admiration thy best weapon shone. The part of Philip's son was thine, not then, unless aside thy purple had been thrown, like stern Diogenes to mock at men. For sceptred cynics earth were far too wide a den. But quiet to quick bosoms is a hell, and there hath been thy bane. There is a fire and motion of the soul which will not dwell in its own narrow being, but aspire beyond the fitting medium of desire, and, but one kindled quenchless evermore, preys upon high adventure, nor can tire of aught but rest, a fever at the core, fatal to him who bears, to all who ever bore. This makes the madmen who have made men mad, by their contagion conquerors and kings, founders of sects and systems, to whom adds sophists, bards, statesmen, all unquiet things, which stir too strongly the soul's secret springs, and are themselves the fools to those they fool. Envied, yet how unenviable! What stings are theirs! One breast laid open were a school, which would unteach mankind the lust to shine or rule. Their breath is agitation, and their life a storm whereon they ride to sink at last, and yet so nursed and bigoted to strife, that should their days, surviving perils past, melt to calm twilight, they feel overcast with sorrow and supiness, and so die, even as a flame unfed which runs to waste, with its own flickering, or a sword laid by, which eats into itself and rusts ingloriously. He who ascends to mountain tops shall find the loftiest peaks most wrapped in clouds and snow. He who surpasses or subdues mankind must look down on the hate of those below. Though high above the sun of glory glow, and far beneath the earth and ocean spread, round him are icy rocks, and loudly blow contending tempests on his naked head, and thus reward the toils which to those summits led. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
On the Monument erected to Mazzini at Genoa, by Algernon Charles Swinburne. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. On the Monument erected to Mazzini at Genoa. Italia, mother of the souls of men, mother divine, of all that served thee best with sword or pen, all sons of thine, thou knowest that here the likeness of the best before thee stands, the head most high, the heart found faithfullest, the purest hands. Above the fume and foam of time that flits, the soul, we know, now sits on high where Alighieri sits with Angelo. Nor his own heavenly tongue hath heavenly speech enough to say what this man was, whose praise no thought may reach, no words can weigh. Since man's first mother brought to mortal birth her firstborn son, such grace befell not ever man on earth as crowns this one. Of God nor man was ever this thing said, that he could give life back to her who gave him, that his dead mother might live. But this man found his mother dead and slain, with fast-sealed eyes, and bade the dead rise up and live again, and she did rise. And all the world was bright with her through him, but dark with strife, like heaven's own sun, that storming clouds bedim, was all his life. Life and the clouds are vanished, hate and fear have had their span of time to hurt, and are not. He is here, the sun-like man. City superb, that hadst Columbus first for sovereign son, be prouder that thy breast hath later nursed this mightier one. Glory be his forever, while this land lives and is free, as with controlling breath and sovereign hand he bade her be. Earth shows to heaven the names by thousands told that crown her fame, but highest of all that heaven and earth, behold Mazzini's name. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
George Washington by Anonymous, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. George Washington. By broad Potomac's silent shore, better than Trajan lowly lies, gilding her green declivities with glory now and evermore. Art to his fame no aid hath lent, his country is his monument. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Washington by James Russell Lowell, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Washington, from Under the Elm, read at Cambridge, July the 3rd, 1875, on the 100th anniversary of Washington's taking command of the American army. Beneath our consecrated elm, a century ago he stood, famed vaguely for that old fight in the wood, which redly foamed round him, but could not overwhelm the life foredoomed to wield our rough-hewn helm. From colleges, where now the gown to arms had yielded, from the town, our rude self-summoned levies flocked to see the new-come chiefs, and wonder which was he. No need to question long, close-lipped and tall, long trained in murder-brooding forests lone, to bridle others' clamours and his own. Firmly erect, he towered above them all, the incarnate discipline that was to free, with iron curb that armed democracy. Haughty they said he was, at first, severe, but owned, as all men owned, the steady hand upon the bridle, patient to command, prized, as all prize, the justice pure from fear, and learned to honour first, then love him, then revere. Such power there is in clear-eyed self-restraint, and purpose clean as light from every selfish taint. Musing beneath the legendary tree, the years between furl off, I seem to see the sunflecks, shaken the stirred foliage through, dapple with gold his sober buff and blue, and weave prophetic aureoles round the head that shines our beacon now, nor darkens with the dead. O man of silent mood, a stranger among strangers then, how art thou since renowned the great, the good, familiar as the day in all the homes of men? The winged years, that winnow praise and blame, blow many names out, they but fan to flame the self-renewing splendours of thy fame. Oh, for a drop of that terse Roman's ink, who gave Agricola dateless length of days to celebrate him fitly, neither swerved to phrase unkempt, nor past discretion's brink, with him so statue-like in sad reserve, so diffident to claim, so forward to deserve. Nor need I shun due influence of his fame, who, mortal among mortals, seemed as now the equestrian shape with unimpassioned brow, that paces silent on through vistas of acclaim. What figure more immovably august than that grave strength so patient and so pure, calm in good fortune, when it wavered, sure, that soul serene, impenetrably just, modelled on classic lines, so simple they endure. That soul so softly radiant and so white, the track it left seems less of fire than light, cold but to such as love distemperature. And if pure light, as some deem, be the force that drives rejoicing planets on their course, why for his power benign seek an impurer source? His was the true enthusiasm that burns long, domestically bright, fed from itself and shy of human sight, the hidden force that makes a lifetime strong, and not the short-lived fuel of a song. Passionless, say you? What is passion for but to sublime our natures and control, to front heroic toils with late return, or none, or such as shames the conqueror? That fire was fed with substance of the soul, and not with holiday stubble, that could burn through 7 slow years of unadvancing war, equal when fields were lost, or fields were won, with breath of popular applause or blame, nor fanned nor damped, unquenchably the same, too inward to be reached by flaws of idle fame. Soldier and statesman, rarest unison, high-poised example of great duties done, simply as breathing, a world's honours worn, as life's indifferent gifts to all men born. Dumb for himself, unless it were to God, but for his barefoot soldiers eloquent, tramping the snow to choral where they trod, held by his awe and hollow-eyed content, modest yet firm as nature's self, unblamed save by the men his nobler temper shamed, not honoured then or now because he wooed the popular voice, but that he still withstood, broad-minded, higher-souled. There is but one who was all this, and ours, and all men's, Washington. Minds strong by fits, irregularly great, that flash and darken like revolving lights, catch more the vulgar eye unschooled to wait on the long curve of patient days and nights, rounding the whole life to the circle fair of orbed completeness, and this balanced soul, so simple in its grandeur, coldly bare of draperies theatric, standing there in perfect symmetry of self-control, seems not so great at first, but greater grows still as we look, and by experience learn how grand this quiet is, how nobly stern the discipline that wrought through lifelong throes this energetic passion of repose. A nature too decorous and severe, too self-respectful in its griefs and joys for ardent girls and boys, who find no genius in a mind so clear that its grave depths seem obvious and near, nor a soul great that made so little noise. They feel no force in that calm, cadenced phrase, the habitual full dress of his well-bred mind, that seems to pace the minuet's courtly maze, and tell of ampler leisures, roomier length of days. His broad-built brain, to self so little kind that no tumultuary blood could blind, formed to control men, not amaze, looms not like those that borrow height of haze. It was a world of statelier movement then than this we fret in, he a denizen of that ideal Rome that made a man for men. Placid completeness, life without a fall from faith our highest aims, truth's breachless wall. Surely if any fame can bear the touch, his wills say, "Here!" at the last trumpet's call, the unexpressive man, whose life expressed so much. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Daniel Webster by Oliver Wendell Holmes. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7. Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Daniel Webster. When stricken by the freezing blast, a nation's living pillars fall. How rich the storied page, how vast a word, a whisper can recall. No medal lifts its fretted face, nor speaking marble cheats your eye. Yet while these pictured lines I trace, a living image passes by. A roof beneath the mountain pines, the cloisters of a hill-girt plain, the front of life's embattled lines, a mound beside the heaving main. These are the scenes. A boy appears, set life's round dial in the sun, count the swift arc of 70 years, his frame is dust, his task is done. Yet pause upon the noontide hour, ere the declining sun has laid his bleaching rays on manhood's power, and look upon the mighty shade. No gloom that stately shape can hide, no change uncrown his brow. Behold! Dark, calm, large fronted, lightning eyed, earth has no double from its mould. Ere from the fields by valour won, the battle smoke had rolled away, and bared the blood-red setting sun, his eyes were opened on the day. His land was but a shelving strip, black with the strife that made it free. He lived to see its banners dip their fringes in the western sea. The boundless prairies learned his name, his words the mountain echoes knew. The northern breezes swept his fame from icy lake to warm bayou. In toil he lived, in peace he died, when life's full cycle was complete, put off his robes of power and pride, and laid them at his master's feet. His rest is by the storm-swept waves, whom life's wild tempests roughly tried, whose heart was like the streaming caves of ocean throbbing at his side. Death's cold white hand is like the snow laid softly on the furrowed hill. It hides the broken seams below, and leaves the summit brighter still. In vain the envious tongue upbraids his name, a nation's heart shall keep, till morning's latest sunlight fades on the blue tablet of the deep. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
William Lloyd Garrison by James Russell Lowell. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. William Lloyd Garrison. Some time afterward it was reported to me by the city officers that they had ferreted out the paper and its editor, that his office was an obscure hole, his only visible auxiliary a negro boy, and his supporters a few very insignificant persons of all color. Letter of H. G. Otis. In a small chamber, friendless and unseen, toiled over his types one poor unlearned young man. The place was dark, unfurnitured and mean, yet there the freedom of a race began. Help came but slowly. Surely no man yet put lever to the heavy world with less. What need of help? He knew how types were set, he had a dauntless spirit and a press. Such earnest natures are the fiery pith, the compact nucleus round which systems grow. Mass after mass becomes inspired therewith, and worlds impregnate with the central glow. O truth! O freedom! Now are ye still born in the rude stable, in the manger nursed. What humble hands unbar those gates of morn, through which the splendors of the new day burst? What! shall one monk, scarce known beyond his cell, front Rome's far-reaching bolts, and scorn her frown? Brave Luther answered yes, that thunder's swell rocked Europe, and discharmed the Triple Crown. Whatever can be known of earth we know, sneered Europe's wise men in their snail shells curled. No, said one man in Genoa, and that no, out of the dark, created this new world. Who is it will not dare himself to trust? Who is it hath not strength to stand alone? Who is it thwarts and bilks the inward must? He and his works, like sand, from earth are blown. Men of 1,000 shifts and wiles, look here! See one straightforward conscience put in pawn To win a world, see the obedient sphere By bravery's simple gravitation drawn. Shall we not heed the lesson taught of old, And by the Present's lips repeated still, In our own single manhood to be bold, Fortressed in conscience and impregnable will? We stride the river daily at its spring, Nor in our childish thoughtlessness foresee What myriad vessel streams shall tribute bring, How like an equal it shall greet the sea. O small beginnings! Ye are great and strong, Based on a faithful heart and weariless brain. Ye build the future fair, ye conquer wrong, Ye earn the crown, and wear it not in vain. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Henry Ward Beecher by Charles Henry Phelps. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7. Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Henry Ward Beecher. His tongue was touched with sacred fire. He could not rest, he must speak out, when liberty lay stabbed, and doubt stalked through the night in vestments dire. When slaves uplifted manacled hands, praying in agony and despair, and answer came not anywhere, but gloom through all the stricken lands. His voice for freedom instant rang. "For shame!" he cried, "spare thou the rod! All men are free before their God." The dragon answered with its fang. "'Tis brave to face embrasured death, hot belching from the cannon's mouth, yet brave it is for north or south, and truth to face the mob's mad breath." So spake he then, he and the few who prize their manhood more than praise. Their faith failed not of better days after the nights of bloody dew. England's great heart misunderstood. She looked upon her child askance, but heard his words and lowered her lance, remembering her motherhood. Majestic liberty, serene, thou frontest on the chaste white sea, quench thou awhile thy torch, for he lies dead on whom thou once did lean. Thy cause was ever his, the slave in any fetters was his friend, his warfare never knew an end, wherever men lay bound, he clave. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Abraham Lincoln, foully assassinated April 14th, 1865, by Tom Taylor, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Abraham Lincoln, foully assassinated April 14th, 1865. Footnote. This tribute appeared in the London Punch, which, up to the time of the assassination of Mr. Lincoln, had ridiculed and maligned him with all its well-known powers of pen and pencil. End footnote. You lay a wreath on murdered Lincoln's bier, you, who with mocking pencil wont to trace, broad for the self-complacent British sneer, his length of shambling limb, his furrowed face, his gaunt, gnarled hands, his unkempt, bristling hair, his garb uncouth, his bearing ill at ease, his lack of all we prize as debonair, of power or will to shine, of art to please. You, whose smart pen backed up the pencil's laugh, judging each step as though the way were plain, reckless, so it could point its paragraph of chief's perplexity, or people's pain. Beside this corpse that bears for winding sheet the stars and stripes he lived to rear anew, between the mourners at his head and feet, say, scurril jester, is there room for you? Yes, he had lived to shame me from my sneer, to lame my pencil and confute my pen, to make me own this hind of princes peer, this rail splitter, a true born king of men. My shallow judgment I had learned to rue, noting how to occasion's height he rose, how his quaint wit made home truth seem more true, how, iron like, his temper grew by blows. How humble, yet how hopeful he could be, how in good fortune and in ill the same, nor bitter in success, nor boastful he, thirsty for gold, nor feverish for fame. He went about his work, such work as few ever had laid on head and heart and hand, as one who knows, where there's a task to do, man's honest will must heaven's good grace command. Who trusts the strength will with the burden grow, that God makes instruments to work his will, if but that will we can arrive to know, nor tamper with the weights of good and ill. So he went forth to battle, on the side that he felt clear was liberty's and right's, as in his peasant boyhood he had plied his warfare with rude nature's thwarting mights. The uncleared forest, the unbroken soil, the iron bark that turns the lumberer's axe, the rapid that o'erbears the boatman's toil, the prairie hiding the mazed wanderer's tracks, the ambushed Indian and the prowling bear, such were the deeds that helped his youth to train. Rough culture, but such trees large fruit may bear, if but their stalk be of right girth and grain. So he grew up, a destined work to do, and lived to do it. 4 long suffering years, ill fate, ill feeling, ill report lived through, and then he heard the hisses change to cheers, the taunts to tribute, the abuse to praise, and took both with the same unwavering mood, till, as he came on light from darkling days, and seemed to touch the goal from where he stood, a felon hand between the goal and him reached from behind his back, a trigger pressed, and those perplexed and patient eyes were dim. Those gaunt, long laboring limbs were laid to rest. The words of mercy were upon his lips, forgiveness in his heart and on his pen, when this vile murderer brought swift eclipse to thoughts of peace on earth, goodwill to men. The old world and the new, from sea to sea, utter one voice of sympathy and shame. Sore heart, so stopped when it at last beat high, sad life, cut short just as its triumph came! A deed accursed. Strokes have been struck before by the assassin's hand, whereof men doubt if more of horror or disgrace they bore. But thy foul crime, like Cain's, stands darkly out. Vile hand that brandest murder on a strife, whate'er its grounds, stoutly and nobly striven, and with the martyr's crown crownest a life with much to praise, little to be forgiven. Tom Taylor. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
O Captain, My Captain, by Walt Whitman, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org, by Thomas Peter. O Captain, My Captain. O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wreck, the prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But, O heart, 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 oh, the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. O Captain, my Captain, rise up and hear the bells, rise up, for you the flag is flung, for you the bugle trills, for you bouquets and ribboned wreaths, For you the shores a crowding, for you they call, the swaying mass, their eager faces turning. Here, Captain, dear father, this arm beneath your head, it is some dream that on the deck you've fallen cold and dead. My captain does not answer, his lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my arm, he has no pulse nor will. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage closed and done. From fearful trip the victor ship comes in with object won. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells! But I, with mournful tread, walk the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
On the Life Mask of Lincoln by Richard Watson Gilder. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. On the Life Mask of Lincoln. This bronze doth keep the very form and mould of our great martyr's face, yet this is he, that brow all wisdom or benignity, that human, humorous mouth, those cheeks that hold like some harsh landscape all the summer's gold, that spirit fit for sorrow as the sea for storms to beat on, the lone agony, those silent, patient lips too well foretold. Yes, this is he who ruled a world of men, as might some prophet of the elder day, brooding above the tempest and the fray, with deep-eyed thought and more than mortal ken. A power was his beyond the touch of art, of armed strength, his pure and mighty heart. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Hand of Lincoln by Edmund Clarence Stedman, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. The Hand of Lincoln. Look on this cast, and know the hand that bore a nation in its hold. From this mute witness understand what Lincoln was, how large of mould. The man who sped the woodman's team, and deepest sunk the ploughman's share, and pushed the laden raft astream, of fate before him unaware. This was the hand that knew to swing the axe, since thus would freedom train her son, and made the forest ring, and drove the wedge, and toiled amain. Firm hand, that loftier office took, a conscious leader's will obeyed, and, when men sought his word and look, with steadfast might the gathering swayed. No courtiers toying with a sword, nor minstrels laid across a lute, a chief's uplifted to the Lord when all the kings of earth were mute. The hand of a knack, sinewed strong, the fingers on that greatness clutch, yet, lo! the marks there lines along of one who strove and suffered much. For here in knotted cord and vein I trace the varying chart of years. I know the troubled heart, the strain, the weight of Atlas, and the tears. Again I see the patient brow that palm erewhile was wont to press, and now 'tis furrowed deep, and now made smooth with hope and tenderness. For something of a formless grace this moulded outline plays about, a pitying flame, beyond our trace, breathes like a spirit, in and out. The love that cast an aureole round one who, longer to endure, called mirth to ease his ceaseless dole, yet kept his nobler purpose sure. Lo, as I gaze, the statured man, built up from yon large hand, appears, a type that nature wills to plan but once in all a people's years. What better than this voiceless cast to tell of such a one as he, since through its living semblance passed the thought that bade a race be free? Edmund Clarence Stedman. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Abraham Lincoln, from the Harvard Commemoration Ode, July the 21st, 1865, by James Russell Lowell. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Abraham Lincoln. Life may be given in many ways, and loyalty to truth be sealed as bravely in the closet as the field. So bountiful is fate, but then to stand beside her, when craven churls deride her, to front a line in arms and not to yield, this shows methinks God's plan, and measure of a stalwart man, limbed like the old heroic breeds, who stand self-poised on manhood's solid earth, not forced to frame excuses for his birth, fed from within with all the strength he needs. Such was he, our martyr chief, whom late the nation he had led with ashes on her head, wept with the passion of an angry grief. Forgive me, if from present things I turn, to speak what in my heart will beat and burn, and hang my wreath on his world-honoured urn. Nature, they say, doth dote, and cannot make a man, save on some worn-out plan, repeating us by rote. For him her old world moulds aside he threw, and choosing sweet clay from the breast of the unexhausted West, with stuff untainted shaped a hero new, wise, steadfast in the strength of God, and true. How beautiful to see! Once more a shepherd of mankind indeed, who loved his charge but never loved to lead, one whose meek flock the people joyed to be, not lured by any cheat of birth, but by his clear-grained human worth, and brave old wisdom of sincerity. They knew that outward grace is dust, they could not choose but trust in that sure-footed mind's unfaltering skill, and supple tempered will, that bent like perfect steel to spring again and thrust. His was no lonely mountain peak of mind, thrusting to thin air o'er our cloudy bars, a sea mark now lost in vapours blind. Broad prairie rather, genial, level-lined, fruitful and friendly for all humankind, yet also nigh to heaven, and loved of loftiest stars. Nothing of Europe here, or then of Europe fronting mornward still, ere any names of serf and peer could nature's equal scheme deface. Here was a type of the true elder race, and one of Plutarch's men talked with us face to face. I praise him not, it were too late, and some initiative weakness there must be in him who condescends to victory, such as the present gives and cannot wait, safe in himself as in a fate. So always firmly he knew to bide his time, and can his fame abide, still patient in his simple faith sublime, till the wise years decide. Great captains, with their guns and drums, disturb our judgment for the hour, but at last silence comes. These all are gone, and standing like a tower, our children shall behold his fame, the kindly, earnest, brave, foreseeing man, sagacious, patient, dreading praise, not blame, new birth of our new soil, the first American. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Albert, Prince Consort of England, from Idylls of the King, by Alfred Lord Tennyson, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Albert, Prince Consort of England. These to his memory, since he held them dear, perchance as finding there unconsciously some image of himself, I dedicate, I consecrate with tears, these ideals. And indeed he seems to me scarce other than my own ideal king, whose reverence his conscience as his king, whose glory was redressing human wrong, who spake no slander, no, nor listened to it, who loved one only, and who clave to her over all whose realms to their last isle commingled with the gloom of imminent war. The shadow of his loss moved like eclipse, darkening the world. We have lost him, he is gone. We know him now, all narrow jealousies are silent, and we see him as he moved, how modest, kindly, all accomplished, wise, with what sublime repression of himself, and in what limits, and how tenderly, not swaying to this faction or to that, not making his high place the lawless perch of winged ambitions, nor a vantage ground for pleasure, but through all this tract of years wearing the white flower of a blameless life, before 1,000 peering littlenesses, in that fierce light which beats upon a throne and blackens every blot. For where is he who dares foreshadow for an only son a lovelier life, a more unstained than his? Or how should England, dreaming of his sons, hope more for these than some inheritance of such a life, a heart, a mind as thine? Thou noble father of her kings to be, laborious for her people and her poor, voice in the rich dawn of an ampler day, far-sighted summoner of war and waste to fruitful strifes and rivalries of peace, sweet nature gilded by the gracious gleam of letters, dear to science, dear to art, dear to thy land and ours, a prince indeed, beyond all titles and a household name, hereafter through all times, Albert the Good. Break not, O woman's heart, but still endure. Break not, for thou art royal, but endure, remembering all the beauty of that star which shone so close beside thee, that ye made one light together, but has passed and left the crown of lonely splendor. May all love, his love unseen but felt, o'ershadow thee. The love of all thy sons encompass thee. The love of all thy daughters cherish thee. The love of all thy people comfort thee, till God's love set thee at his side again. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Virgil by Alfred Lord Tennyson, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. To Virgil, written at the request of the Mantuans for the 19th centenary of Virgil's death, BC 19. 1. Roman Virgil, thou that singest Ilion's lofty temples robed in fire, Ilion falling, Rome arising, wars and filial faith, and Dido's pyre. 2. Landscape lover, lord of language, more than he that sang the works and days, all the chosen coin of fancy flashing out from many a golden phrase. 3. Thou that singest wheat and woodland, tilth and vineyard, hive and horse and herd, all the charm of all the muses, often flowering in a lonely word. 4. Poet of the happy Tityrus, piping underneath his beechen bowers, poet of the poet's satyr whom the laughing shepherd bound with flowers. 5. Chanter of the Pollio, glorying in the blissful years again to be, summers of the snakeless meadow, unlaborious earth and all a sea. 6. thou that seest universal nature moved by universal mind, thou majestic in thy sadness at the doubtful doom of human kind. 7. Light among the vanished ages, star that gildest yet this phantom shore, golden branch amid the shadows, kings and realms that pass to rise no more. 8. Now thy forum roars no longer, fallen every purple Caesar's dome, though thine ocean roll of rhythm sound forever of imperial Rome. 9. Now the Rome of slaves hath perished, and the Rome of freemen holds her place. I, from out the northern island, sundered once from all the human race. 10. I salute thee, Mantovano, I that loved thee since my day began, wielder of the stateliest measure ever moulded by the lips of man. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
In a copy of Omar Khayyam by James Russell Lowell, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. In copy of Omar Khayyam, these pearls of thought in Persian gulfs were bred, each softly lucent as a rounded moon. The diver Omar plucked them from their bed, Fitzgerald strung them on an English thread. Fit rosary for a queen in shape and hue, when contemplation tells her pensive beads of mortal thoughts for ever old and new. Fit for a queen? Why surely then for you. The moral: when doubt's eddies toss and twirl, faith slender shall up till her footing reel. Plunge, if you find not peace beneath the whirl, groping, you may like Omar grasp a pearl. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Madame de Sévigné, playing blind man's buff, by Monsieur de Montreuil, translated anonymously from the French. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. To Madame de Sévigné, playing blind man's buff. You charm when you talk, walk, or move, still more on this day than another. When blinded, you're taken for love. When the bandage is off, for his mother. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
George Sand by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. George Sand. True genius, but true woman, dost deny thy woman's nature with a manly scorn, and break away the gauds and armlets worn by weaker women in captivity? Ah, vain denial! That revolted cry is sobbed in by a woman's voice forlorn. Thy woman's hair, my sister, all unshorn, floats back dishevelled strength in agony, disproving thy man's name. And while before the world thou burnest in a poet fire, we see thy woman heart beat evermore through the large flame. Beat purer, heart, and higher, till God unsex thee on thy heavenly shore, where unincarnate spirits purely aspire. Elizabeth Barrett Browning. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Victor Hugo by Alfred Lord Tennyson, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. To Victor Hugo. Victor in poesy, victor in romance, cloud weaver of phantasmal hopes and fears, French of the French, and lord of human tears, child-lover, bard, whose fame did laurels glance, darkening the wreath of all that would advance beyond our strait their claim to be thy peers. Weird Titan, by thy wintry weight of years as yet unbroken, stormy voice of France, who does not love our England, so they say, I know not. England, France, all men to be, will make one people ere man's race be run. And I, desiring that diviner day, yield thee full thanks for thy full courtesy to younger England in the boy, my son. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. On a Bust of Dante by Thomas William Parsons, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. On a Bust of Dante. See, from this counterfeit of him, whom Arno shall remember long, how stern of lineament, how grim the father was of Tuscan song. There but the burning sense of wrong, perpetual care and scorn abide, small friendship for the lordly throng, distrust of all the world beside. Faithful if this one image be, no dream his life was, but a fight. Could any Beatrice see a lover in that anchorite? To that cold Ghibelline's gloomy sight, who could have guessed the visions came of beauty veiled with heavenly light, in circles of eternal flame? The lips, as Cumae's cavern close, the cheeks with fast and sorrow thin, the rigid front, almost morose, but for the patient hope within, declare a life whose course hath been unsullied still, though still severe, which, through the wavering days of sin, kept itself icy chaste and clear. Not wholly such his haggard look, when wandering once, forlorn he strayed, with no companion, save his book, to Corvo's hushed monastic shade, where, as the Benedictine laid his palm upon the pilgrim guest, the single boon for which he prayed, the convent's charity, was rest. Peace dwells not here. This rugged face betrays no spirit of repose. The sullen warrior soul we trace, the marble man of many woes. Such was his mien, when first arose the thought of that strange tale divine, when hell he peopled with his foes, the scourge of many a guilty line. War to the last he waged with all the tyrant cankerworms of earth. Baron and duke, in hold and hall, cursed the dark hour that gave him birth. He used Rome's harlot for his mirth, plucked bare hypocrisy and crime, but valiant souls of knightly worth transmitted to the rolls of time. O Time, whose verdicts mock our own, the only righteous judge art thou. That poor old exile, sad and lone, is Latium's other Virgil now. Before his name the nations bow. His words are parcel of mankind, deep in whose hearts, as on his brow, the marks have sunk of Dante's mind. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Hans Christian Andersen, 1805 to 1875, by Edmund Goss, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Hans Christian Andersen, 1805 to 1875. A being cleaves the moonlit air, with eyes of dew and plumes of fire, newborn, immortal, strong and fair, glance ere he goes. His feet are shrouded like the dead, but in his face a wild desire breaks like the dawn that flushes red, and like a rose. The stars shine out above his path, and music wakes through all the skies. What mortal such a triumph hath, by death set free? What earthly hands and heart are pure as this man's, whose unshrinking eyes gaze onward through the deep obscure, nor quail to see? Ah! This was he who drank the fount of wisdom set in speechless things, who, patient, watched the day-star mount while others slept. Ah! This was he whose loving soul found heartbeats under trembling wings, and heard divinest music roll where wild springs leapt. For poor dumb lips had song for him, and children's dreamings ran in tune, and strange old heroes, weird and dim, walked by his side. The very shadows loved him well, and danced and flickered in the moon, and left him wondrous tales to tell, men far and wide. And now no more he smiling walks through greenwood alleys full of sun, and, as he wanders, turns and talks, though none be there. The children watch in vain the place where they were wont, when day was done, to see their poet's sweet worn face and faded hair. Yet dream not such a spirit dies, though all its earthly shrine decay. Transfigured under clearer skies, he sings anew, the frail soul covering racked with pain and scored with vigil fades away. The soul set free and young again glides upward through. Weep not, but watch the moonlit air. Perchance a glory like a star may leave what hangs about him there, and flash on us. Behold! The void is full of light, the beams pierce heaven from bar to bar, and all the hollows of the night grow luminous. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Sir Philip Sidney, from an elegy on a friend's passion for his astrophil, by Matthew Royden. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Sir Philip Sidney. Within these woods of Aradir he chief delight and pleasure took, and on the mountain Parthenia, upon the crystal liquid brook, the Muses met him every day, that taught him sing, to write and say. When he descended down the mount, his personage seemed most divine, 1,000 graces one might count upon his lovely cheerful eyne. To hear him speak and sweetly smile, you were in paradise the while. A sweet attractive kind of grace, a full assurance given by looks, continual comfort in a face, the lineament of gospel books. I trow that countenance cannot lie, whose thoughts are legible in the eye. Was never eye did see that face, was never care did hear that tongue, was never mind did mind his grace, that ever thought the travel long. But eyes and ears and every thought were with his sweet perfection caught. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To the Memory of Ben Jonson, by John Cleveland, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. To the Memory of Ben Jonson. The Muse's fairest light in no dark time, the wonder of a learned age, the line which none can pass, the most proportioned wit, to nature the best judge of what was fit, the deepest, plainest, highest, clearest pen, the voice most echoed by consenting men, the soul which answered best to all well said by others, and which most requital made, tuned to the highest key of ancient Rome, returning all her music with his own, in whom with nature study claimed a part, and yet who to himself owed all his art. Here lies Ben Jonson, every age will look with sorrow here, with wonder on his book. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Ode to Ben Jonson by Robert Herrick, from The World's Best Poetry Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Ode to Ben Jonson. Ah, Ben, say how, or when, shall we, thy guests, meet at those lyric feasts, made at the sun, the dog, the triple tun, where we such clusters had as made us nobly wild, not mad, and yet each verse of thine outdid the meat, outdid the frolic wine. My Ben, or come again, or send to us thy wit's great overplus, but teach us yet wisely to husband it, lest we that talent spend, and having once brought to an end that precious stock, the store of such a wit, the world should have no more. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
On the Portrait of Shakespeare by Ben Jonson, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. On the Portrait of Shakespeare. This figure that thou here seest put, it was for gentle Shakespeare cut, wherein the graver had a strife with nature to outdo the life. Oh, could he but have drawn his wit as well in brass as he hath hit his face, the print would then surpass all that was ever writ in brass. But since he cannot, reader, look not at his picture, but his book. Ben Jonson. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To the memory of my beloved master, William Shakespeare, and what he hath left us, by Ben Jonson. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. To the memory of my beloved master, William Shakespeare, and what he hath left us. To draw no envy, Shakespeare, on thy name, am I thus ample to thy book and fame, while I confess thy writings to be such as neither man nor muse can praise too much. Soul of the age, the applause, delight, the wonder of our stage, my Shakespeare, rise. I will not lodge thee by Chaucer or Spenser, or bid Beaumont lie a little further off to make thee room. Thou art a monument without a tomb, and art alive still while thy book doth live, and we have wits to read and praise to give. That I not mix thee so, my brain excuses, I mean with great but disproportioned muses. For if I thought my judgment were of years, I should commit thee surely with thy peers, and tell how far thou didst our Lyly outshine, or Sporting Kid, or Marlowe's mighty line. And though thou hadst more Latin and less Greek, from thence to honour thee I will not seek for names, but call forth thundering Aeschylus, Euripides, and Sophocles to us, Pacuvius, Accius, him of Cordova dead, to live again, to hear thy buskin tread, and shake a stage; or when thy socks were on, leave thee alone for the comparison of all that insolent Greece or haughty Rome sent forth, or since did from their ashes come. Triumph, my Britain! thou hast one to show, to whom all scenes of Europe homage owe. He was not of an age, but for all time, and all the Muses still were in their prime, when, like Apollo, he came forth to warm our ears, or like a Mercury to charm. Nature herself was proud of his designs, and joyed to wear the dressing of his lines, which were so richly spun, and woven so fit, as since she will vouchsafe no other wit. The merry Greek, tart Aristophanes, Neat Terence, witty Plautus now not please, but antiquated and deserted lie, as they were not of nature's family. Yet must I not give nature all. Thy art, my gentle Shakespeare, must enjoy a part. For though the poet's matter nature be, his art doth give the fashion, and that he who casts to write a living line must sweat, such as thine are, and strike the second heat upon the muse's anvil, turn this same, and himself with it that he thinks to frame, or for the laurel gain a scorn, for a good poet's made as well as born. And such wert thou. Look how the father's face lives in his issue, even so the race of Shakespeare's mind and manners brightly shines in his well turned and true filed lines, in each of which he seems to shake a lance as brandished at the eyes of ignorance. Sweet swan of Avon, what a sight it were to see thee in our water yet appear, and make those flights upon the banks of Thames, that so did take Eliza and our James! But stay, I see thee in the hemisphere advanced, and made a constellation there. Shine forth, thou star of poets, and with rage or influence chide or cheered the drooping stage, which since thy flight from hence hath mourned like night, and despair's day, but for thy volume's light. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Shakespeare from Prologue by Dr. Samuel Johnson, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Shakespeare from Prologue. Spoken by Mr. Garrick at the opening of the theatre in Drury Lane in 1747. When learning's triumph o'er her barbarous foes first reared the stage, immortal Shakespeare rose. Each change of many-colored life he drew, exhausted worlds, and then imagined new. Existence saw him spurn her bounded reign, and panting time toiled after him in vain. His powerful strokes presiding truth impressed, and unresisted passion stormed the breast. Dr. Samuel Johnson. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
An epitaph on the admirable dramatic poet W. Shakespeare by John Milton. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. An epitaph on the admirable dramatic poet W. Shakespeare. What needs my Shakespeare for his honoured bones? The labour of an age in pillared stones, or that his hallowed relics should be hid under a starry pointed pyramid. Dear son of memory, great heir of fame, what needest thou such weak witness of thy name? Thou, in our wonder and astonishment, hast built thyself a living monument. For whilst to the shame of slow endeavouring art thy easy numbers flow, and that each heart hath from the leaves of thy unvalued book those Delphic lines with deep impression took, then thou, our fancy of itself bereaving, dost make us marble with too much conceiving, and so sepulchred in such pomp dost lie, that kings for such a tomb would wish to die. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Shakespeare by Hartley Coleridge, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Shakespeare. The soul of man is larger than the sky, deeper than ocean, o'er the abysmal dark of the unfathomed centre. Like that ark, which in its sacred hold uplifted high o'er the drowned hills the human family and stock reserved of every living kind, so, in the compass of the single mind, the seeds and pregnant forms in essence lie that make all words. Great poet, 'twas thy art to know thyself, and in thyself to be whate'er love, hate, ambition, destiny, or the firm fatal purpose of the heart can make of man. Yet thou wert still the same, serene of thought, unhurt by thy own flame. Hartley Coleridge. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Guilielmus Rex by Thomas Bailey Aldrich, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. Guilielmus Rex. The folk who lived in Shakespeare's day, and saw that gentle figure pass by London Bridge, his frequent way, they little knew what man he was. The pointed beard, the courteous mien, the equal port to high and low, all this they saw or might have seen, but not the light behind the brow. The doublet's modest grey or brown, the slender sword hilt's plain device, what sign had these for prince or clown? Few turned, or none, to scan him twice. Yet was the king of England's kings; the rest, with all their pomps and trains, are mouldered, half-remembered things. 'Tis he alone that lives and reigns. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Hierarchy of Angels by Thomas Heywood. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7. Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Hierarchy of Angels. Mellifluous Shakespeare, whose enchanting quill commanded mirth or passion, was but will; and famous Johnson, though his learned pen be dipped in Castaly, is still but Ben. Fletcher and Webster, of that learned pack, none of the meanest was but Jack. Decker but Tom, nor May, nor Middleton, and he's but now Jack Ford that once was John. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Under the Portrait of John Milton, prefixed to Paradise Lost, by John Dryden. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. Under the Portrait of John Milton, prefixed to Paradise Lost. 3 poets, in 3 distant ages born, Greece, Italy, and England did adorn. The first in loftiness of thought surpassed, the next in majesty, in both the last. The force of nature could no further go; to make a third, she joined the former two. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Milton, London, 1802, by William Wordsworth. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. To Milton, London, 1802. Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour. England hath need of thee. She is a fen of stagnant waters. Altar, sword, and pen, fireside, the heroic wealth of hall and bower, have forfeited their ancient English dower of inward happiness. We are selfish men. Oh, raise us up, return to us again, and give us manners, virtue, freedom, power. Thy soul was like a star, and dwelt apart. Thou hadst a voice whose sound was like the sea, pure as the naked heavens, majestic, free. So didst thou travel on life's common way, in cheerful godliness, and yet thy heart the lowliest duties on herself did lay. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Walton's Book of Lives, from Ecclesiastical Sonnets, Part 3, by William Wordsworth, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Walton's Book of Lives, from Ecclesiastical Sonnets, Part 3. There are no colours in the fairest sky so fair as these. The feather, whence the pen was shaped that traced the lives of these good men, dropped from an angel's wing. With moistened eye we read of faith and purest charity in statesman, priest, and humble citizen. Oh, could we copy their mild virtues, then what joy to live, what blessedness to die! Methinks their very names shine still and bright, apart, like glowworms on a summer night, or lonely tapers when from far they fling a guiding ray, or seen, like stars on high, satellites burning in a lucid ring around meek Walton's heavenly memory. William Wordsworth. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Sonnet by William Wordsworth, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. The Sonnet. Scorn not the sonnet, critic. You have frowned, mindless of its just honours. With this key Shakespeare unlocked his heart. The melody of this small lute gave ease to Petrarch's wound. 1,000 times this pipe did Tasso sound. With it Camoens soothed an exile's grief. The sonnet glittered a gay myrtle leaf amid the cypress with which Dante crowned his visionary brow. A glow-worm lamp, it cheered mild Spenser, called from fairyland to struggle through dark ways, and when a damp fell round the path of Milton, in his hand the thing became a trumpet, whence he blew soul-animating strains. Alas, too few. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Campbell Charade, by Winthrop Mackworth Praed, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Campbell Charade. Come from my first, aye, come, the battle dawn is nigh, and the screaming trump and the thundering drum are calling thee to die. Fight as thy father fought, fall as thy father fell. Thy task is taught, thy shroud is wrought, so forward and farewell. Toll ye my second toll, fling high the flambeau's light, and sing the hymn for a parted soul beneath the silent night. The wreath upon his head, the cross upon his breast, let the prayer be said and the tear be shed, so take him to his rest. Call ye my whole, aye, call the Lord of lute and lay, and let him greet the sable pall with a noble song to-day. Go, call him by his name, no fitter hand may crave to light the flame of a soldier's fame on the turf of a soldier's grave. Winthrop Mackworth Praed. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Thomas Moore, by Lord Byron. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. To Thomas Moore. My boat is on the shore, and my bark is on the sea. But before I go, Tom Moore, here's a double health to thee. Here's a sigh to those who love me, and a smile to those who hate. And whatever skies above me, here's a heart for every fate. Though the ocean roar around me, yet it still shall bear me on. Though a desert should surround me, it hath springs that may be won. Wert the last drop in the well, as I gasped upon the brink, ere my fainting spirit fell, 'tis to thee that I would drink. With that water as this wine, the libation I would pour should be peace with thine and mine, and health to thee, Tom Moore. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Shelley, by Alexander Hay Japp. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Shelley. The odour of a rose, light of a star, the essence of a flame blown on by wind, that lights and warms all near it, bland and kind, that aye consumes itself, as though at war with what supports and feeds it. From afar it draws its life, but ever more inclined to leap into the flame that makes men blind, who seek the secret of all things that are. Such wert thou, Shelley, bound for airiest goal, interpreter of quintessential things, who mounted ever up on eagle wings of fantasy, had aimed at heaven, and stole Promethean fire for men to be as gods, and dwell in free, aerial abodes. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Memorabilia by Robert Browning. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. Memorabilia. Ah, did you once see Shelley plain? And did he stop and speak to you? And did you speak to him again? How strange it seems, and new! But you were living before that, and also you are living after, and the memory I started at, my starting moves your laughter. I crossed the moor with a name of its own, and a certain use in the world, no doubt, yet a hand's breadth of it shines alone mid the blank miles round about. For there I picked up on the heather, and there I put inside my breast a moulted feather, an eagle feather. Well, I forget the rest. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Byron, From the Course of Time, Book 4, by Robert Pollock. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Byron, From the Course of Time, Book 4. He touched his harp, and nations heard entranced, as some vast river of unfailing source, rapid, exhaustless, deep his numbers flowed, and opened new fountains in the human heart, where fancy halted, weary in her flight. In other men his fresh as morning rose, and soared untrodden heights, and seemed at home, where angels bashful looked, others, though great, beneath their argument seemed struggling whiles. He, from above descending, stooped to touch the loftiest thought, and proudly stooped, as though it scarce deserved his verse. With nature's self he seemed an old acquaintance, free to jest, at will with all her glorious majesty. He laid his hand upon the ocean's main, and played familiar with his hoary locks, stood on the Alps, stood on the Apennines, and with the thunder talked as friend to friend, and wove his garland of the lightning's wing, in sportive twist, the lightning's fiery wing, which, as the footsteps of the dreadful god, marching upon the storm in vengeance, seemed, then turned, and with the grasshopper who sung his evening song beneath his feet, conversed. Suns, moons, and stars, and clouds his sisters were, rocks, mountains, meteors, seas, and winds, and storms, his brothers, younger brothers, whom he scarce as equals deemed, all passions of all men, the wild and tame, the gentle and severe, all thoughts, all maxims sacred and profane, all creeds, all seasons, time, eternity, all that was hated and all that was dear, all that was hoped, all that was feared by man, he tossed about, as tempest withered leaves, then smiling looked upon the wreck he made. With terror now he froze the cowering blood, and now dissolved the heart in tenderness, yet would not tremble, would not weep himself, but back into his soul retired alone, dark, sullen, proud, gazing contemptuously on hearts and passions prostrate at his feet. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Macaulay as Poet by Walter Savage Landor. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Macaulay as Poet. The dreamy rhymer's measured snore falls heavy on our ears no more, and by long strides are left behind the dear delights of womankind, who wage their battles like their loves, in satin waistcoats and kid gloves, and have achieved the crowning work when they have trussed and skewered a Turk. Another comes with stouter tread, and stalks among the statelier dead. He rushes on, and hails by turns high-crested Scot, broad-breasted Burns, and shows the British youth, who ne'er will lag behind, what Romans were, when all the Tuscans and their Lars shouted and shook the towers of Mars. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
On the Departure of Sir Walter Scott from Abbotsford for Naples by William Wordsworth, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. On the Departure of Sir Walter Scott from Abbotsford for Naples. A trouble not of clouds or weeping rain, nor of the setting sun's pathetic light engendered, hangs o'er Eildon's triple height. Spirits of power, assembled there, complain for kindred power departing from their sight, while Tweed, best pleased in chanting a blithe strain, saddens his voice again, and yet again. Lift up your hearts, ye mourners, for the might of the whole world's good wishes with him goes. Blessings and prayers a nobler retinue than sceptred king or laurelled conqueror knows, follow this wondrous potentate. Be true, ye winds of ocean and the midland sea, wafting your charge to soft Parthenope. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To the Memory of Thomas Hood by Bartholomew Symonds, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. To the Memory of Thomas Hood. Take back into thy bosom, earth, this joyous May-eyed morrow, the gentlest child that ever mirth gave to be reared by sorrow. 'Tis hard, while rays half green, half gold, through vernal bowers are burning, and streams like diamond mirrors hold to summer's face returning, to say we're thankful that his sleep shall nevermore be lighter, in whose sweet-tongued companionship stream of bower and beam grow brighter. But all the more intensely true, his soul gave out each feature of elemental love, each hue and grace of golden nature. The deeper still, beneath it all, lurked the keen jags of anguish. The more the laurels clasped his brow, their poison made it languish. Seemed it that, like the nightingale, of his own mournful singing, the tenderer would his song prevail, while most the thorn was stinging. So never to the desert worn did fount bring freshness deeper than this his placid rest this morn has brought the shrouded sleeper, that rest may lap his weary head, where Charles choke the city, of where, mid woodlands by his bed, the wren shall wake its ditty. But near or far, while evening star is dear to hearts regretting, around that spot admiring thought shall hover unforgetting. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Burns, A Poet's Epitaph by Ebenezer Elliott, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Burns, A Poet's Epitaph. Stop, mortal! Here thy brother lies, the poet of the poor. His books were rivers, woods, and skies, the meadow and the moor. His teachers were the torn heart's wail, the tyrant and the slave, the street, the factory, the jail, the palace, and the grave. Sin met thy brother everywhere, and is thy brother blamed? From passion, danger, doubt, and care, he no exemption claimed. The meanest thing, earth's feeblest worm, he feared to scorn or hate, but honouring in a peasant's form the equal of the great, he blessed the steward, whose wealth makes the poor man's little more, yet loathed the haughty wretch that takes from plundered labour's store. A hand to do, a head to plan, a heart to feel and dare. Tell man's worst foes, here lies the man who drew them as they are. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Burns, on receiving a sprig of heather in blossom, by John Greenleaf Whittier, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. Burns, on receiving a sprig of heather in blossom. No more these simple flowers belong to Scottish maid and lover. Sown in the common soil of song, they bloom the wide world over. In smiles and tears, in sun and showers, the minstrel and the heather, the deathless singer and the flowers he sang of, live together. Wild heather bells and Robert Burns, the moorland flower and peasant, how at their mention memory turns her pages old and pleasant. The grey sky wears again its gold and purple of adorning, and manhood's noonday shadows hold the dews of boyhood's morning. The dews that wash the dust and soil from off the wings of pleasure, the sky that flecked the ground of toil with golden threads of leisure. I call to mind the summer day, the early harvest mowing, the sky with sun and clouds at play, and flowers with breezes blowing. I hear the blackbird in the corn, the locust in the haying, and like the fabled hunter's horn, old tunes my heart is playing. How oft that day, with fond delay, I sought the maple's shadow, And sang with Burns the hours away, Forgetful of the meadow. Bees hummed, birds twittered, overhead I heard the squirrel sleeping, The good dog listened while I read, And wagged his tail in keeping. I watched him while in sportive mood I read the Twa Dogs' story, And half believed he understood The poet's allegory. Sweet day, sweet songs! The golden hours Grew brighter for that singing, From brook and bird and meadow flowers A dearer welcome bringing. New light on home seen nature beamed, New glory over woman, And daily life and duty seemed No longer poor and common. I woke to find the simple truth Of fact and feeling better Than all the dreams that held my youth A still repining debtor. That Nature gives her handmaid, Art, the themes of sweet discoursing, The tender idyls of the heart, In every tongue rehearsing. Why dreams of lands of gold and pearl, Of loving knight and lady, When farmer boy and barefoot girl Were wandering there already? I saw through all familiar things The romance underlying, The joys and griefs that plume the wings Of fancy skyward flying. I saw the same blithe day return, The same sweet fall of even, That rose on wooded craggy burn, And sank on crystal Devon. I matched with Scotland's heathery hills The sweet brier and the clover, With air and dune my native rills Their wood hymns chanting over. O'er rank and pomp, as he had seen, I saw the man uprising, No longer common or unclean, The child of God's baptizing. With clearer eyes I saw the worth Of life among the lowly, The Bible at his cotter's hearth Had made my own more holy. And if at times an evil strain To lawless love appealing, Broke in upon the sweet refrain Of pure and healthful feeling, It died upon the eye and ear, No inward answer gaining, No heart had I to see or hear The discord and the staining. Let those who never erred forget His worth in vain bewailings. Sweet soul of song, I own my debt Uncancelled by his failings. Lament who will the ribald line Which tells his lapse from duty, How kissed the maddening lips of wine, Or wanton ones of beauty. But think, while falls that shade between The erring one and heaven, That he who loved the Magdalene Like her may be forgiven. Not his the song whose thunderous chime Eternal echoes render, The mournful Tuscan's haunted rhyme, And Milton's starry splendour. But who his human heart has laid To nature's bosom nearer, Who sweetened toil like him, or paid To love a tribute dearer? Through all his tuneful art, how strong The human feeling gushes! The very moonlight of his song Is warm with smiles and blushes. Give lettered pomp to teeth of time, So bonny Dune but tarry, Blot out the epic's stately rhyme, But spare his Highland Mary. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. To Benjamin Robert Hayden by John Keats, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. To Benjamin Robert Hayden. Great spirits now on earth are sojourning, He of the cloud, the cataract, the lake, Who on Helvellyn's summit, wide awake, Catches his freshness from archangel's wing, He of the rose, the violet, the spring, The social smile, the chain for freedom's sake, And lo, whose steadfastness would never take A meaner sound than Raphael's whispering. And other spirits there are, standing apart, Upon the forehead of the age to come. These will give the world another heart, And other pulses. Hear ye not the hum of mighty workings? Listen awhile, ye nations, and be dumb. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
On a Portrait of Wordsworth by B.R. Hayden, by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. On a Portrait of Wordsworth by B.R. Hayden. Wordsworth, upon Helvellyn, let the cloud ebb audibly along the mountain wind, then break against the rock, and show behind the lowland valleys floating up to crowd the sense with beauty. He, with forehead bowed and humble-lidded eyes, as one inclined before the sovereign thought of his own mind, and very meek, with inspirations proud, takes here his rightful place as poet-priest, by the high altar, singing prayer, and prayer to the higher heavens. A noble vision free our Hayden's hand hath flung out from the mist. No portrait this with academic air. This is the poet and his poetry. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Lost Leader by Robert Browning, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. The Lost Leader. Just for a handful of silver he left us, just for a ribbon to stick in his coat. Found the one gift of which fortune bereft us, lost all the others she lets us devote. They, with the gold to give, doled him out silver. So much was theirs, who so little allowed. How all our copper had gone for his service, rags were they purple, his heart had been proud. We that had loved him so, followed him, honoured him, lived in his mild and magnificent eye, learned his great language, caught his clear accents, made him our pattern to live and to die. Shakespeare was of us, Milton was for us, Burns, Shelley were with us, they watched from their graves. He alone breaks from the van and the freeman, he alone sinks to the rear and the slaves. We shall march prospering, not through his presence. Songs may inspirit us, not from his lyre. Deeds will be done while he boasts his quiescence, still bidding crouch whom the rest bade aspire. Blot out his name, then record one lost soul more. One task more declined, one more footpath untrod, one more devil's triumph and sorrow for angels. One wrong more to man, one more insult to God. Life's night begins, let him never come back to us. There would be doubt, hesitation, and pain, forced praise on our part, the glimmer of twilight, never glad, confident morning again. Best fight on well, for we taught him, strike gallantly, menace our heart ere we master his own. Then let him receive the new knowledge and wait us, pardoned in heaven, the first by the throne. End of poem. Footnote. This bitter attack, famous for its invective, was made by Browning, 1845, on Wordsworth, after the latter had accepted the post of Poet Laureate, 1843. Thus, in Browning's view, deserting the people and selling himself to the government. Wordsworth's only official poem, however, was on the installation of Albert, Prince Consort, as Chancellor of Cambridge University in 1847, and in 1850 he died, so that the protest of Browning was not justified. Indeed, in 1875 Browning himself wrote, "I did in my hasty youth presume to use the great and venerated personality of Wordsworth as a sort of painter's model, one from which this or the other particular feature may be selected and turned to account. Had I intended more, I should not have talked about handfuls of silver and bits of ribbon. These never influenced the change of politics in the great poet, whose defection, nevertheless, was to my juvenile apprehension and even mature consideration an event to be deplored. End of footnote. This recording is in the public domain.
Memorial Verses, April 1850, by Matthew Arnold, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Memorial Verses, April 1850. Goethe in Weimar sleeps, and Greece, long since, saw Byron's struggles cease. But one such death remained to come, the last poetic voice is dumb. We stand today by Wordsworth's tomb. When Byron's eyes were shut in death, we bowed our head and held our breath. He taught us little, but our soul had felt him like the thunder's roll. With shivering heart the strife we saw of passion with eternal law, and yet with reverential awe we watched the fount of fiery life which served for that titanic strife. When Goethe's death was told, we said, "Sunk then is Europe's sagest head. Physician of the Iron Age, Goethe has done his pilgrimage. He took the suffering human race, he read each wound, each weakness clear, and struck his finger on the place, and said, 'Thou ailest here and here.' He looked on Europe's dying hour of fitful dream and feverish power. His eye plunged down the weltering strife, the turmoil of expiring life. He said, 'The end is everywhere. Art still has truth. Take refuge there.' And he was happy, if to know causes of things, and far below his feet to see the lurid flow of terror and insane distress and headlong fate be happiness. And Wordsworth, pale ghosts rejoice, for never has such soothing voice been to your shadowy world conveyed, since erst at morn some wandering shade heard the clear song of Orpheus come through Hades and the mournful gloom. Wordsworth has gone from us, and ye, may ye feel his voice as we. He too upon a wintry clime had fallen, on this iron time of doubts, disputes, distractions, fears. He found us when the age had bound our souls in its benumbing round. He spoke, and loosed our hearts in tears. He laid us as we lay at birth on the cool flowery lap of earth. Smiles broke from us, and we had ease. The hills were round us, and the breeze went o'er the sunlit fields again. Our foreheads felt the wind and rain. Our youth returned, for there was shed on spirits that had long been dead, spirits dried up and closely furled, the freshness of the early world. Since dark days still bright to light man's prudence and man's fiery might, time may restore us in his course, Goethe's sage mind and Byron's force. But where will Europe's latter hour again find Wordsworth's healing power? Others will teach us how to dare, and against fear our breast to steel. Others will strengthen us to bear. But who will make us feel? The cloud of mortal destiny, others will front it fearlessly. But who, like him, will put it by? Keep fresh the grass upon his grave, O Rotha, with thy living wave. Sing him thy best, for few or none hears thy voice right. Now he is gone. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. From Wordsworth's Grave by William Watson, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. From Wordsworth's Grave. Poet who sleepest by this wandering wave, when thou wast born, what birth-gift hadst thou then? To thee what wealth was that the immortals gave, the wealth thou gavest in thy turn to men? Not Milton's keen, translunar music thine, nor Shakespeare's cloudless, boundless human view, not Shelley's flush of rose on peaks divine, nor yet the wizard twilight Coleridge knew. What hadst thou that could make so large amends for all thou hadst not and thy peers possessed, motion and fire, swift means to radiant ends? Thou hadst for weary feet the gift of rest. From Shelley's dazzling glow or thunderous haze, from Byron's tempest anger, tempest mirth, men turned to thee and found, not blast and blaze, tumult of tottering heavens, but peace on earth. Nor peace that grows by leaf, scentless flower, there in white languors to decline and cease, but peace whose names are oh so rapture, power, clear sight, and love, for these are parts of peace. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
In Memory of Walter Savage Landor by Algernon Charles Swinburne, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. In Memory of Walter Savage Landor. Back to the flower town, side by side, the bright months bring, new born, the bridegroom and the bride, freedom and spring. The sweet land laughs from sea to sea, filled full of sun. All things come back to her, being free, all things but one. In many a tender wheaten plot flowers that were dead live, and old suns revive, but not that holier head. By this white wandering waste of sea, far north, I hear one face shall never turn to me as once this year, shall never smile and turn and rest on mine as there, nor one most sacred hand be pressed upon my hair. I come as one whose thoughts half linger, half run before, the youngest to the oldest singer that England bore. I found him whom I shall not find till all grief end, in holiest age, our mightiest mind, father and friend. But thou, if anything endure, if hope there be, O spirit that man's life left pure, man's death set free, not with disdain of days that were look earthward now. Let dreams revive the reverend hair, the imperial brow. Come back in sleep, for in the life where thou art not we find none like thee. Time and strife and the world's lot move thee no more, but love at last and reverent heart may move thee, royal and released soul as thou art. And thou, his Florence, to thy trust receive and keep. Keep safe his dedicated dust, his sacred sleep. So shall thy lovers, come from far, mix with thy name as morning star with evening star, his faultless fame. Algernon Charles Swinburne. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
A Welcome to Boz on his first visit to the West by W. H. Venable, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. A Welcome to Boz on his first visit to the West. Come as artist, come as guest, welcome to the expectant West, hero of the charmed pen, loved of children, loved of men. We have felt thy spell for years, oft with laughter, oft with tears. Thou hast touched the tenderest part of our inmost hidden heart. We have fixed our eager gaze on thy pages, nights and days, wishing, as we turned them o'er, like poor Oliver, for more, and the creatures of thy brain in our memory remain, till through them we seem to be old acquaintances of thee. Much we hold it thee to greet, gladly sit we at thy feet. On thy features we would look, as upon a living book, and thy voice would grateful hear, glad to feel that Boz were near, that his veritable soul held us by direct control. Therefore, author loved the best, welcome, welcome to the West. In immortal Weller's name, by Micawber's deathless fame, by the flogging wreaked on Squeers, by Job Trotter's fluent tears, by the beadle Bumble's fate at the hands of vixen mate, by the famous Pickwick Club, by the dream of Gabriel Grubb, in the name of Snodgrass's muse, Tupman's amorous interviews, Winkle's ludicrous mishaps, and the fat boy's countless naps, by Ben Allen and Bob Sawyer, by Miss Sally Brass, the lawyer, in the name of Newman Noggs, River Thames and London fogs, Richard Swiveler's excess, feasting with the Marchioness, by Jack Bunsby's oracles, by the chime of Christmas bells, by the cricket on the hearth, Scrooge's frown and Crotchet's mirth, by spread tables and good cheer, wayside inns and pots of beer, hostess plump and jolly host, coaches for the turnpike post, chambermaids in love with boots, Toodles, Traddles, Tapley, Toots, Yarley, Varden, Mr. Dick, Susan Nipper, Mistress Chick, Snevellicci, Lillyvick, Mantalini's predilections, to transfer his dem afflictions, Potsnap, Pecksniff, Chuzzlewit, Quilp and Simon Tapperett, Wegg and Boffin, Smike and Paul, Nell and Jenny Wren and all. Be not Sary Gamp forgot, no, nor Peggotty and Trot, by poor Barnaby and Grip, Flora, Dora, Di and Gip, Perrybingle, Pinch and Pip. Welcome, long-expected guest, welcome, Dickens, to the West. In the name of gentle Nell, child of light, beloved well, weeping did we not behold roses on her bosom cold? Better we for every tear shed beside her snowy bier, by the mournful group that played round the grave where Smike was laid, by the life of Tiny Tim and the lesson taught by him, asking in his plaintive tone God to bless us every one, by the sounding waves that bore little Paul to heaven's shore, by thy yearning for the human good in every man and woman, by each noble deed and word that thy story-books record, and each noble sentiment Dickens to the world hath lent, by the effort thou hast made, truth and true reform to aid, by thy hope of man's relief, finally, from want and grief, by thy never-failing trust, that the God of love is just, we would meet and welcome thee, preacher of humanity. Welcome fills the throbbing breast of the sympathetic West. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Dickens in Camp by Bret Harte, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Dickens in Camp. Above the pines the moon was slowly drifting, the rivers sang below, the dim Sierras, far beyond, uplifting their minarets of snow. The roaring camp-fire, with a rude humour, painted the ruddy tints of health on haggard face and form that drooped and fainted in the fierce race for wealth, till one arose, and from his pack's scant treasure a hoarded volume drew, and cards were dropped from hands of listless leisure to hear the tale anew. And then, while round them shadows gathered faster, and as the firelight fell, he read aloud the book wherein the master had writ of Little Nell. Perhaps 'twas boyish fancy, for the reader was youngest of them all, but as he read, from clustering pine and cedar a silence seemed to fall. The fir trees, gathering closer in the shadows, listened in every spray, while the whole camp, with Nell on English meadows, wandered and lost their way. And so in mountain solitudes, o'ertaken as by some spell divine, their cares dropped from them like the needles shaken from out the gusty pine. Lost is that camp, and wasted all its fire, and he who wrought that spell, ah, towering pine and stately Kentish spire, ye have one tale to tell. Lost is that camp, but let its fragrant story blend with the breath that thrills with hot vines' incense all the pensive glory that fills the Kentish hills. And on that grave where English oak and holly and laurel wreaths entwine, deem it not all a too presumptuous folly, this spray of western pine. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Dickens by Algernon Charles Swinburne. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Dickens. Chief in thy generation, born of men, whom English praise acclaimed as English-born, with eyes that matched the world-wide eyes of morn, for gleam of tears or laughter tenderest then, when thoughts of children warmed their light, or when reverence of age, with love and labour worn, or godlike pity fired with godlike scorn, shot through them flame that winged thy swift live pen, where stars and suns that we beheld not burn higher even than here, though highest was here thy place. Love sees thy spirit laugh and speak and shine, with Shakespeare and the soft bright soul of Sterne, and Fielding's kindliest might, and Goldsmith's grace, scarce one more loved or worthier than thine. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Thackeray by Richard Monckton Milnes, Lord Houghton. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. To Thackeray. O gentler censor of our age, prime master of our ampler tongue, whose word of wit and generous page were never wroth except with wrong. Fielding, without the manner's dross, Scott, with the spirit's larger room, what prelate deems thy grave his loss? What Halifax erects thy tomb? But may be he, who could so draw the hidden great, the humble wise, yielding with them to God's good law, makes the Pantheon where he lies. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Tennyson by Thomas Bailey Aldrich. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. Tennyson. Shakespeare and Milton, what third blazoned name shall lips of after ages link to these? His who, beside the wild encircling seas, was England's voice, her voice with one acclaim, for 60 years, whose word of praise was fame, whose scorn gave pause to man's iniquities. What strain was his in that Crimean war? A bugle call in battle, a low breath, plaintive and sweet, above the fields of death. So year by year the music rolled afar, from Euxine wastes to flowery Kandahar, bearing the laurel or the cypress wreath. Others shall have their little space of time, their proper niche and bust, then fade away into the darkness, poets of a day. But thou, O builder of enduring rhyme, thou shalt not pass. Thy fame in every clime on earth shall live, where Saxon speech has sway. Waft me this verse across the winter sea, through light and dark, through mist and blinding sleet, O wintry winds, and lay it at his feet. Though the poor gift betray my poverty, at his feet lay it. It may chance that he will find no gift where reverence is unmeet. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Lacrimae Musarum, 6th of October, 1892, by William Watson. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Lacrimae Musarum, 6th of October, 1892. Lo, like another's lies the laurelled head, the life that seemed a perfect song is o'er. Carry the last great bard to his last bed. Land that he loved, thy noblest voice is mute. Land that he loved, that loved him nevermore. Meadow of thine, smooth lawn or wild seashore, gardens of odorous bloom and tremulous fruit, or woodlands old, like druid couches spread, the master's feet shall tread. Death's little rift hath rent the faultless lute, the singer of undying songs is dead. Lo, in this season, pensive-hued and grave, while fades and falls the doomed reluctant leaf from withered earth's fantastic coronal, with wandering sighs of forest and of wave, mingles the murmur of a people's grief for him whose leaf shall fade not, neither fall. He hath fared forth beyond these suns and showers, for us the autumn glow, the autumn flame, and soon the winter silent shall be ours. Him the eternal spring of fadeless fame crowns with no mortal flowers. Rapt though he be from us, Virgil salutes him, and Theocritus, Catullus, mightiest-brained Lucretius, each greets him, their brother, on the Stygian beach. Proudly a gaunt right hand doth Dante reach, Milton and Wordsworth bid him welcome home, bright Keats to touch his raiment doth beseech, Coleridge, his locks aspersed with fairy foam, calm Spenser, Chaucer suave, his equal friendship crave, and godlike spirits hail him guest in speech of Athens, Florence, Weimar, Stratford, Rome. What needs his laurel our ephemeral tears, to save from visitation of decay? Not in his temporal sunlight, now, that bay blooms nor to perishable mundane ears, sings he with lips of transitory clay, for he hath joined the chorus of his peers in habitations of the perfect day. His earthly notes a heavenly audience hears, and more melodious are henceforth the spheres, enriched with music stolen from earth away. He hath returned to regions whence he came, Him doth the Spirit divine of universal loveliness reclaim. All nature is his shrine. Seek him henceforth in the wind and sea, in earth's and air's emotion or repose, in every star's august serenity, and in the rapture of the flaming rose. There seek him, if ye would not seek in vain, there, in the rhythm and music of the whole, yea, and forever in the human soul, made stronger and more beauteous by his strain. For lo, creation's self is one great choir, and what is nature's order but the rhyme, whereto the worlds keep time, and all things move with all things from their prime? Who shall expound the mystery of the lyre? In far retreats of elemental mind obscurely comes and goes the imperative breath of song that, as the wind, is trackless and oblivious whence it blows. Demand of lilies wherefore they are white, extort her crimson secret from the rose, but ask not of the muse that she disclose the meaning of the riddle of her might. Somewhat of all things sealed and recondite, save the enigma of herself she knows. The master could not tell, with all his lore, wherefore he sang, or whence the mandate sped. Even as the linnet sings, so I, he said, ah, rather as the imperial nightingale, that held in trance the ancient Attic shore, and charms the ages with the notes that o'er all woodland chants immortally prevail. And now, from our vain plaudits greatly fled, he with diviner silence dwells instead, and on no earthly sea with transient roar, unto no earthly airs he trims his sail, but far beyond our vision and our hail is heard forever, and is seen no more. No more, O never now, Lord of the lofty and the tranquil brow, whereon nor snows of time have fallen, nor wintry rime, shall men behold thee, sage and mage sublime. Once in his youth obscure, the maker of this verse which shall endure, by splendour of its theme that cannot die, beheld thee eye to eye, and touched through thee the hand of every hero of thy race divine, even to the sire of all the laurelled line, the sightless wanderer on the Ionian strand, with soul as healthful as the poignant brine, wide as his skies and radiant as his seas, starry from haunts of his familiars nine, glorious Maionides. Yet I beheld thee, and behold thee yet. Thou hast forgotten, but can I forget? The accents of thy pure and sovereign tongue, are they not ever goldenly impressed on memory's palimpsest? I see the wizard locks like night that hung, I tread the floor thy hallowing feet have trod, I see the hands a nation's lyre that strung, the eyes that looked through life and gazed on God. The seasons change, the winds they shift and veer, the grass of yesteryear is dead, the birds depart, the groves decay, empires dissolve and peoples disappear. Song passes not away, captains and conquerors leave a little dust, and kings a dubious legend of their reign. The swords of Caesars, they are less than rust, the poet doth remain. Dead is Augustus, Maro is live, and thou, the Mantuan of our age and clime, like Virgil shalt thy race and tongue survive, bequeathing no less honeyed words to time, embalmed in amber of eternal rhyme, and rich with sweets from every muse's hive, while to the measure of the cosmic rune, for purer ears thou shalt thy lyre attune, and heed no more the hum of idle praise. In that great calm our tumults cannot reach, Master, who crown'st our immelodious days with flower of perfect speech. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Robert Browning by Walter Savage Landor, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Robert Browning. There is delight in singing, though none hear beside the singer. And there is delight in praising, though the praiser sit alone and see the praised far off him, far above. Shakespeare is not our poet, but the world's, therefore on him no speech. And brief for thee, Browning, since Chaucer was alive and hale, no man hath walked along our roads with step so active, so inquiring eye, or tongue so varied in discourse. But warmer climes give brighter plumage, stronger wing. The breeze of Alpine's heights thou playest with, borne on beyond Sorrento and Amalfi, where the siren waits thee, singing song for song. Walter Savage Landor. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Burial of Robert Browning by Michael Field, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. The Burial of Robert Browning. Upon St. Michael's Isle they laid him for a while, that he might feel the ocean's full embrace, and wedded be to that wide sea, the subject and the passion of his race. As Thetis from some lovely underground, springing she girds him round with lapping sound and silent space, then, on more honour bent, she sues the firmament, and bids the hovering western clouds combine to spread their sabled amber on her lustrous brine. It might not be he should lie free for ever in the soft light of the sea, for lo, one came, of step more slow than fame, stooped over him, we heard her breathe his name, and as the light drew back, bore him across the track of the subservient waves that dare not foil that veiled maternal figure of its spoil. Ah! Where will she put by her journeying majesty? She hath left the lands of the air and sun, she will take no rest till her course be run. Follow her far, follow her fast, until, at last, within a narrow transept led, lo, she unwraps her face to pall her dead. 'Tis England who has travelled far, England who brings fresh splendour to her galaxy of kings. We kiss her feet, her hands, where eloquent she stands, nor dare to lend a wailful choir about the poet dumb, who is become part of the glory that her sons would bleed to save from scar, yea, hers in very deed as Runnymede or Trafalgar. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Joseph Rodman Drake died in New York, September 1820, by Fitz Greene Halleck, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Joseph Rodman Drake died in New York, September 1820. Green be the turf above thee, friend of my better days. None knew thee but to love thee, nor named thee but to praise. Tears fell when thou wert dying, from eyes unused to weep, and long where thou art lying will tears the cold turf steep. When hearts whose truth was proven, like thine are laid in earth, there should a wreath be woven to tell the world their worth. And I who woke each morrow to clasp thy hand in mine, who shared thy joy and sorrow, whose weal and woe were thine. It should be mine to braid it around thy faded brow, but I've in vain essayed it, and feel I cannot now. While memory bids me weep thee, nor thoughts nor words are free, the grief is fixed too deeply that mourns a man like thee. Fitz Green Halleck. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Fitz Green Halleck by John Greenleaf Whittier. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Fitz Green Halleck. Read at the unveiling of his statue in Central Park, May, 1877. Among the graven shapes to whom thy civic wreaths belong, O city of his love, make room for one whose gift was song. Not his the soldier's sword to wield, nor his the helm of state, nor glory of the stricken field, nor triumph of debate. In common ways, with common men, he served his race and time as well as if his clerkly pen had never danced to rhyme. If in the thronged and noisy mart the muses found their sun, could any say his tuneful art a duty left undone? He toiled and sang, and year by year men found their homes more sweet, and through a tenderer atmosphere looked down the brick-walled street. The Greeks' wild onset Wall Street knew, the Red King walked Broadway, and Alnwick Castle's roses blew from palisades to bay. Fair city by the sea, upraise his veil with reverent hands, and mingle with thy own the praise and pride of other lands. Let Greece his fiery lyric breathe above her hero urns, and Scotland with her holly wreathe the flowers he culled for Burns. O stately stand thy palace walls, thy tall ships ride the seas. To-day thy poet's name recalls a prouder thought than these. Not less thy pulse of trade shall beat, nor less thy tall fleets swim. That shaded square and dusty street are classic ground through him. Alive, he loved, like all who sing, the echoes of his song. Too late the tardy meed we bring, the praise delayed so long. Too late, alas! Of all who knew the living man, to-day before his unveiled face, how few make bare their locks of grey. Our lips of praise must soon be dumb, our grateful eyes be dim. O brothers of the days to come, take tender charge of him. New hands the wires of song may sweep, new voices challenge fame, but let no moss of year o'ercreep the lines of Halleck's name. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Poe's Cottage at Fordham by John Henry Bonar. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Poe's Cottage at Fordham. Here lived the soul enchanted by melody of song. Here dwelt the spirit haunted by a demoniac throng. Here sang the lips elated, here grief and death were sated, here loved and here unmated was he so frail, so strong. Here wintry winds and cheerless the dying firelight blew, while he whose song was peerless dreamt the drear midnight through. And from dull embers chilling crept shadows darkly filling the silent place and thrilling his fancy as they grew. Here, with brow bared to heaven, in starry night he stood, with a lost star of seven feeling sad brotherhood. Here, in the sobbing showers of dark autumnal hours, he heard suspected powers shriek through the stormy wood. from visions of Apollo and of Astarte's bliss. He gazed into the hollow and hopeless vale of Dis. And though heaven were surrounded by heaven, it still was mounded with graves his soul had sounded, the dolorous abyss. Proud, mad, but not defiant, he touched at heaven and hell. Fate found a rare soul pliant, and rung her changes well. Alternately his lyre, stranded with strings of fire, led earth's most happy choir, or flashed with Israfel. No singer of old story, luting accustomed lays, no harper for new glory, no mendicant for praise. He struck his chords and splendid, wherein were fiercely blended tones that unfinished ended with his unfinished days. Here, through this lowly portal, made sacred by his name, unheralded, immortal, the mortal went and came. And fate that then denied him, and envy that decried him, and malice that belied him, have cenotaphed his fame. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
On the Death of Thomas Carlyle and George Eliot by Algernon Charles Swinburne. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. On the Death of Thomas Carlyle and George Eliot. Two souls diverse, out of our human sight, pass, followed one with love and each with wonder. The stormy sophist, with his mouth of thunder, clothed with loud words and mantled in the might of darkness and magnificence of night, and one whose eye could smite the night in sunder, searching if light or no light were thereunder, and found in love of loving kindness light. Duty divine and thought with eyes of fire, still following righteousness with deep desire, shone sole and stern before her and above. Sure stars and soul to steer by, but more sweet shone lower the loveliest lamp for earthly feet, the light of little children and their love. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Carlyle and Emerson by Montgomery Schuyler. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Carlyle and Emerson. A bale fire kindled in the night, by night ablaze, by day a cloud. With flame and smoke all England woke. It climbed so high, it roared so loud, while over Massachusetts pines uprose a white and steadfast star, and many a night it hung unwatched. It shone so still, it seemed so far. But light is fire, and fire is light, and mariners are glad for these, the torch that flares along the coast, the star that beams above the seas. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Emerson, Concord, by Sarah Chauncey Woolsey, Susan Coolidge. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Emerson, Concord. Farther horizons every year, O tossing pines which surge and wave above the poet's just made grave, and waken for his sleeping ear the music that he loved to hear. Through summer's sun and winter's chill, with purpose staunch and dauntless will, sped by a noble discontent, you climb toward the blue firmament. Climb as the winds climb, mounting high the viewless ladders of the sky, spurning our lower atmosphere, heavy with sighs and dense with night, and urging upward, year by year, to ampler air, diviner light. Farther horizons every year, Beneath you pass the tribes of men, your gracious boughs o'ershadow them. You hear, but do not seem to heed their jarring speech, their faulty creed. Your roots are firmly set in soil, won from their humming paths of toil. Content their lives to watch and share, to serve them, shelter, and upbear, yet but to win an upward way and larger gift of heaven than they. Benignant view and attitude, close knowledge of celestial sign, still working for all earthly good, while pressing on to the divine. Farther horizons every year. So he by reverent heads just laid beneath your layers of waving shade, climbed as you climb the upward way, knowing not boundary nor stay. His eyes surcharged with heavenly lights, his senses steeped in heavenly sights, his soul attuned to heavenly keys. How should he pause for rest or ease? Or turn his winged feet again to share the common feasts of men? He blessed them with his word and smile, but, still above their fickle moods, wooing, constraining him, the while beckoned with shining altitudes. Farther horizons every year. To what immeasurable height, what clear irradiance of light, what far and all transcendent goal hast thou now risen, O steadfast soul! We may not follow with our eyes to where the further pathway lies, nor guess what vision, vast and free, God keeps in store for souls like thee. But still the century pines, which wave their boughs above thy honored grave, shall be thy emblems brave and fit, firm rooted in the stalwart sod, blessing the earth while spurning it, content with nothing short of God. Sarah Chauncey Woolsey, Susan Coolidge. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Lowell on Himself. From A Fable for Critics by James Russell Lowell. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7. Descriptive and Narrative Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Lowell on Himself. From A Fable for Critics. There is a Lowell whose striving Parnassus to climb, with a whole bale of isms tied together with rhyme. He might get on alone, spite of brambles and boulders, but he can't with that bundle he has on his shoulders. The top of the hill he will ne'er come nigh reaching, till he learns the distinction twixt singing and preaching. His lyre has some chords that would ring pretty well, but he'd rather by half make a drum of the shell, and rattle away till he's old as Methusalem, at the head of a march to the last New Jerusalem. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Out from behind this mask to confront his own portrait for The Wound Dresser in Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Out from behind this mask to confront his own portrait for The Wound Dresser in Leaves of Grass. Out from behind this bending, rough-cut mask, these lights and shades, this drama of the whole, this common curtain of the face contained in me, in you, for you, in each, this common curtain of the face contained in me, in you, for you, in each, for each. Tragedies, sorrows, laughter, tears, O heaven! The passionate teeming plays this curtain hid, this glaze of God's serenest, purest sky, this film of Satan's seething pit, this heart's geography's map, this limitless small continent, this soundless sea out from the convolutions of this globe, This subtler astronomic orb than sun or moon, than Jupiter, Venus, Mars, this condensation of the universe, nay, here the only universe, here the idea, all in this mystic handful wrapped. These burned eyes flashing to you, to past to future time, to launch and spin through space, revolving, sidling from these to emanate, to you, whoe'er you are, a look. A traveller of thoughts and years, of peace and war, of youth long sped, and middling age declining, as the first volume of a tale perused and laid away, and this the second, songs, ventures, speculations, presently to close, lingering a moment here and now, to you I opposite turn, as on the road, or at some crevice door by chance, or opened window, pausing, inclining, bearing my head, you specially I greet, to draw and clinch your soul for once inseparably with mine, then travel, travel on. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Myself, from the Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Myself, from the Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul, I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood, formed from this soil, this air, born here of parents, born here from parents the same, and their parents the same. I now, 37 years old, in perfect health begin, hoping to cease not till death. Creeds and schools in abeyance, retiring back a while, sufficed at what they are, but never forgotten. I harbour for good or bad, I permit to speak at every hazard. Nature without check, with original energy. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Hawthorne by Edmund Clarence Stedman, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. Hawthorne, harp of New England song, that even in slumber trembled with the touch of poets who like the four winds from thee waken all harmonies that to thy strings belong. Say, wilt thou blame the younger hands too much, which from thy laurelled resting place have taken the crowned one in their hold? There is a name should quicken thee. No carol Hawthorne sang, yet his articulate spirit, like thine own, made answer, quick as flame, to each breath of the shore from which he sprang, and prose like his was poesy's high tone. But he whose quickened eye saw through New England's life her inmost spirit, her heart, and all the stays on which it leant, returns not, since he laid the pencil by whose mystic touch none other shall inherit. What though its work unfinished lies? Half bent the rainbow's arch fades out in upper air. The shining cataract half way down the height breaks into mist. The haunting strain that fell on listeners unaware ends incomplete, but through the starry night the ear still waits for what it did not tell. Edmund Clarence Stedman. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Hawthorne by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. LongFellow. Jason in Canada. Hawthorne. How beautiful it was that one bright day in the long week of rain! Though all its splendor could not chase away the omnipresent pain. The lovely town was white with apple blooms, and the great elms o'erhead dark shadows wove on their aerial looms shot through with golden thread. Across the meadows, by the gray old manse, the historic river flowed. I was as one who wanders in a trance, unconscious of his road. The faces of familiar friends seemed strange, their voices I could hear, and yet the words they uttered seemed to change their meaning to my ear. For the one face I looked for was not there, the one low voice was mute. Only an unseen presence filled the air, and baffled my pursuit. Now I look back, and meadow, manse, and stream dimly my thought defines. I only see, a dream within a dream, the hilltop hearsed with pines. I only hear above his place of rest their tender undertone, the infinite longings of a troubled breast, the voice so like his own. There in seclusion, and remote from men, the wizard hand lies cold, which at its topmost speed let fall the pen and left the tale half told. Ah, who shall lift that wand of magic power, and the lost clue regain? The unfinished window in Aladdin's tower, unfinished, must remain. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Harriet Beecher Stowe by Paul Laurence Dunbar. From The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Harriet Beecher Stowe. She told the story, and the whole world wept at wrongs and cruelties it had not known, but for this fearless woman's voice alone. She spoke to consciences that long had slept, her message freedom's clear reveille swept from heedless hovel to complacent throne. Command and prophecy were in the tone, and from its sheath the sword of justice leapt. Around two peoples swelled a fiery wave, but both came forth transfigured from the flame. Blessed be the hand that dared be strong to save, and blessed be she who in our weakness came. Prophet and priestess, at one stroke she gave a race to freedom and herself to fame. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, on his birthday, 27th February, 1867. By James Russell Lowell, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason in Canada. To Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, on his birthday, 27th February, 1867. I need not praise the sweetness of his song, where limpid verse to limpid verse succeeds smooth as our Charles, when, fearing lest he wrong the new moon's mirrored skiff, he slides along, full without noise, and whispers in his reeds. With loving breath of all the winds his name is blown about the world, but to his friends a sweeter secret hides behind his fame, and love steals shyly through the loud acclaim to murmur a God bless you, and there ends. As I muse backward up the checkered years, wherein so much was given, so much was lost, blessings in both kinds, such as cheapen tears. But hush! This is not for profaner ears, let them drink molten pearls nor dream the cost. Some suck up poison from a sorrow's core, as naught but nightshade grew upon earth's ground. Love turned all his to heart's ease, and the more fate tried his bastions, she but forced a door, leading to sweeter manhood and more sound. Even as a wind-waved fountain's swaying shade seems of mixed race, a grey wraith shot with sun, so through his trial faith translucent rayed, till darkness, half disnatured so, betrayed a heart of sunshine that would fain o'errun. Surely if skill in song these shears may stay, and of its purpose cheat the charmed abyss, if our poor life be lengthened by a lay, he shall not go, although his presence may, and the next age in praise shall double this. Long days be his, and each as lusty sweet as gracious natures find his song to be. May age steal on with softly cadenced feet, falling in music, as for him were meet whose choicest verse is harsher toned than he. James Russell Lowell. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Longfellow, In Memoriam, by Austin Dobson. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. Longfellow, In Memoriam. Nec terpem senectam, digere, nic cithara carentem. Not to be tuneless in old age, surely blessed his pilgrimage, who, in his winter's snow, still sings with note as sweet and clear as in the mornings of the year when the first violets blow. Blessed, but more blessed, whom summer's heat, whom spring's impulsive stir and beat have taught no feverish lure, whose muse, benignant and serene, still keeps his autumn chaplet green, because his verse is pure. Lie calm, O white and laureate head, lie calm, O dead, that art not dead, since from the voiceless grave thy voice shall speak to old and young, while song yet speaks our English tongue by Charles or Thamis wave. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. House, by Robert Browning. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. House. Shall I sonnet sing you about myself? Do I live in a house you would like to see? Is it scant of gear? Has it store of pelf? Unlock my heart with a sonnet key. Invite the world as my betters have done. Take notice, this building remains on view, its suites of reception every one, its private apartments and bedroom too. For a ticket, apply to the publisher. No, thanking the public, I must decline. A peep through my window folk prefer, but please you, no foot over threshold of mine. I have mixed with a crowd and heard free talk in a foreign land where an earthquake chanced, and a house stood gaping, naught to balk man's eye wherever he gazed or glanced. The whole of the frontage, shaven sheer, the inside gaped, exposed to day, right and wrong and common and queer, bare as the palm of your hand it lay. The owner? Oh, he had been crushed, no doubt. Odd tables and chairs for a man of wealth. What a parcel of musty old books about! He smoked. No wonder he lost his health. I doubt if he bathed before he dressed. A brazier, the pagan, he burned perfumes. You see, it is proved what the neighbours guessed. His wife and himself had separate rooms. Friends, the good man of the house at least kept house to himself till an earthquake came. 'Tis the fall of its frontage permits you to feast on the inside arrangement you praise or blame. Outside should suffice for evidence, and whoso desires to penetrate deeper must dive by the spirit sense, no optics like yours at any rate. Hoity-toity, a street to explore, your house the exception. With this same key Shakespeare unlocked his heart once more. Did Shakespeare? If so, the less Shakespeare he. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Art Criticism by Walter Savage Landor. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Craig Franklin. Art Criticism. First bring me Raphael, who alone hath seen in all her purity heaven's virgin queen. Alone hath felt true beauty. Bring me then Titian, ennobler of the noblest men. And next the sweet Correggio, nor chastise his little cupids for those wicked eyes. I want not Rubens' pink puffy bloom, nor Rembrandt's glimmer in a dusty room. With those and Poussin's nymph-frequented woods, his templed heights and long-drawn solitudes, I am content, yet fain would look abroad on one warm sunset of Ausonian Claude. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Anne Hathaway, to the idol of my eye and delight of my heart, Anne Hathaway, by Anonymous, from the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative Part 1, read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Anne Hathaway, to the idol of my eye and delight of my heart, Anne Hathaway. Footnote: this poem has sometimes, but without much reason, been attributed to Shakespeare. End of footnote. Would ye be taught, ye feathered throng, with love's sweet notes to grace your song, to pierce the heart with thrilling lay, listen to mine Anne Hathaway. She hath a way to sing so clear, Phoebus might wandering stop to hear. To melt the sad, make blithe the gay, and nature charm, Anne hath a way. She hath a way, Anne Hathaway, to breathe delight, Anne Hathaway. When envy's breath and rancorous tooth do soil and bite fair worth and truth, and merit to distress betray, to soothe the heart, Anne hath a way. She hath a way to chase despair, to heal all grief, to cure all care, turn foulest night to fairest day. She knowest, fond heart, Anne hath a way. She hath a way, Anne hath a way, to make grief bliss, Anne hath a way. Talk not of gems, the orient list, the diamond, topaz, amethyst, the emerald mild, the ruby gay. Talk of my gem, Anne Hathaway. She hath a way with her bright eye their various lustres to defy. The jewels she, and the foil they, so sweet to look, Anne hath a way. She hath a way, Anne hath a way, to shame bright gems, Anne hath a way. But were it to my fancy given to rate her charms, I'd call them heaven. For though a mortal made of clay, angels must love Anne Hathaway. She hath a way so to control, to rapture the imprisoned soul, and sweetest heaven on earth display, that to be heaven Anne hath a way. She hath a way, Anne hath a way, to be heaven's self, Anne hath a way. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Poet's Friend, Lord Bolingbroke, from an Essay on Man, Epistle 4, by Alexander Pope. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. The Poet's Friend, Lord Bolingbroke, from an Essay on Man, Epistle 4. Come then, my friend, my genius, come along. O master of the poet and the song! And while the muse now stoops, or now ascends, To man's low passions, or their glorious ends, Teach me, like thee, in various nature wise, To fall with dignity, with temper rise. Form'd by thy converse happily to steer From grave to gay, from lively to severe, Correct with spirit, eloquent with ease, Intent to reason, or polite to please. O, while along the stream of time thy name Expanded flies, and gathers all its fame, Say, shall my little bark attendant sail, Pursue the triumph, and partake the gale? When statesmen, heroes, kings in dust repose, Whose sons shall blush their fathers were thy foes, Shall then this verse to future age pretend, Thou wert my guide, philosopher, and friend, That urged by thee I turned the tuneful art From sounds to things, from fancy to the heart, For wit's false mirror held up nature's light, Showed erring pride whatever is right. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
A Bard's Epitaph by Robert Burns. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Adrian Stevens. A Bard's Epitaph. Is there a whim-inspired fool, oer fast for thought, oer hot for rule, oer blat to seek, oer proud to snole? Let him draw nae, and o'er this graspy heap sing, dool, and drap a tear. Is there a bard of rustic song, who, noteless, steals the crowd among, that weakly this area throng? Oh, pass not by, but with a threat of feeling strong, here heave a sigh. Is there a man whose judgment clear can others teach the course to steer, yet runs himself life's mad career, wild as the wave? Here pause, and through the starting tear survey this grave. The poor inhabitant below was quick to learn, and wise to know, and keenly felt the friendly glow and sober flame, but thoughtless follies laid him low, and stained his name. Reader, attend whether thy soul soars fancy's flights beyond the pole, or darkly grubs this earthly hole in low pursuit. No, prudent, cautious self-control is wisdom's root. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Chopin by Emma Lazarus. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Chopin. 1. A dream of interlinking hands, a feet tireless to spin the unseen, fairy woof of the entangling waltz. Bright eye-beams meet, gay laughter echoes from the vaulted roof. Warm perfumes rise, the soft unflickering glow of branching lights sets off the changeful charms of glancing gems, rich stuffs, the dazzling snow of necks unkerchiefed and bare clinging arms. Hark to the music! How beneath the strain of reckless revelry vibrates and sobs one fundamental chord of constant pain, the pulse beat of the poet's heart that throbs. So yearns, though all the dancing waves rejoice, the troubled sea's disconsolate deep voice. 2. Who shall proclaim the golden fable false of Orpheus' miracles? This subtle strain above our prose world's sordid loss and gain lightly uplifts us. With the rhythmic waltz, the lyric prelude, the nocturnal song of love and languor, varied visions rise that melt and blend to our enchanted eyes. The Polish poet who sleeps silenced long, The seraph-souled musician breathes again eternal eloquence, immortal pain. Revive the exalted face we know so well, the illuminated eyes, the fragile frame, slowly consuming with its inward flame. We stir not, speak not, lest we break the spell. 3. A voice was needed, sweet and true and fine as the sad spirit of the evening breeze, throbbing with human passion, yet divine as the wild bird's untutored melodies. A voice for him 'neath twilight heavens dim, who mourneth for his dead, while round him fall the wan and noiseless leaves. A voice for him who sees the first green sprout, who hears the call of the first robin on the first spring day. A voice for all whom fate hath set apart, who, still misprized, must perish by the way, longing with love, for that they lack the art of their own soul's expression. For all these sing the unspoken hope, the vague, sad reveries. 4. The nature shaped a poet's heart, a lyre from out whose chords the slightest breeze that blows drew trembling music, wakening sweet desire. How shall she cherish him? Behold, she throws this precious, fragile treasure in the whirl of seething passions. He is scourged and stung, must dive in storm-vexed seas, if but one pearl of art or beauty therefrom may be wrung. No pure-browed pensive nymph his muse shall be, an Amazon of thought with sovereign eyes, whose kiss was poison, man-brained, worldly wise, inspired that elfin, delicate harmony. Rich gain for us, but with him is it well? The poet who must sound earth, heaven, and hell. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Prayer of Agassiz by John Greenleaf Whittier. From the World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia as the narrator
and Craig Franklin as the master.
The Prayer of Agassiz. On the Isle of Penny Keys, ringed about by sapphire seas, fanned by breezes salt and cool, stood the master with his school. Over sails that not in vain wooed the west wind's steady strain, line of coast that low and far stretched its undulating bar, wings aslant along the rim of the waves they stooped to skim, rock and isle and glistening bay, fell the beautiful white day. Said the master to the youth,
We have come in search of truth, trying with uncertain key door by door of mystery. We are reaching through his laws to the garment hem of cause. Him, the endless, unbegun, the unnameable, the one. Light of all our light the source, life of life and force of force, as with fingers of the blind we are groping here to find what the hieroglyphics mean of the unseen in the scene, what the thought which underlies nature's masking and disguise, what it is that hides beneath blight and bloom and birth and death, by past efforts unavailing, doubt and error, loss and failing, of our weakness made aware on the threshold of our task. Let us light and guidance ask. Let us pause in silent prayer.
Then the master in his place bowed his head a little space, and the leaves by soft airs stirred. Lapse of wave and cry of bird left the solemn hush unbroken of that wordless prayer unspoken, while its wish, on earth unsaid, rose to heaven interpreted. As in life's best hours we hear, by the Spirit's finer ear, his low voice within us, thus the All-Father heareth us, and his holy ear we pain with our noisy words and vain. Not for him our violence, storming at the gates of sense. His the primal language, his the eternal silences. Even the careless heart was moved, and the doubting gave assent, with a gesture reverent, to the Master well beloved. As thin mists are glorified by the light they cannot hide, all who gaze upon him saw, through its veil of tender awe, how his face was still uplit by the old sweet look of it, hopeful, trustful, full of cheer, and the love that casts out fear. Who the secret may declare of that brief unuttered prayer, did the shade before him come of the inevitable doom, of the end of earth so near, and eternity's new year? In the lap of sheltering seas rests the Isle of Penny Keys, but the lord of the domain comes not to his own again. Where the eyes that follow fail, on a vaster sea his sail drifts beyond our beck and hail. Other lips within its bound shall the laws of life expound, other eyes from rock and shell read the world's old riddles well. But when breezes light and bland blow from summer's blossomed land, when the air is glad with wings, and the blithe song sparrow sings, many an eye with his still face shall the living one's displace. Many an ear the word shall seek he alone could fitly speak, and one name forevermore shall be uttered o'er and o'er, by the waves that kiss the shore, by the curlew's whistle sent down the cool sea-scented air, in all voices known to her, nature own her worshipper, half in triumph, half lament. Thither love shall tearful turn, friendship pause uncovered there, and the wisest reverence learn from the Master's silent prayer. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Cain died February 16th, 1857, by Fitz James O'Brien, from The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1. Read for LibriVox.org by Jason, in Canada. Cain died February 16, 1857. Aloft upon old Balsatic crag, which, scalped by keen winds that defend the pole, gazes with dead face on the seas that roll around the secret of the mystic zone, a mighty nation's star-bespangled flag flutters alone, and underneath, upon the lifeless front of that drear cliff, a simple name is traced. Fit type of him who, famishing and gaunt, but with a rocky purpose in his soul, breasted the gathering snows, clung to the drifting floes, by want beleaguered, and by winter chased, seeking the brother lost amid that frozen waste. Not many months ago we greeted him, crowned with the icy honors of the North. Across the land his hard-won fame went forth, and Maine's deep woods were shaken limb by limb. His own mild keystone state, sedate and prim, burst from decorous quiet as he came. Hot southern lips, with eloquence of flame, sounded in triumph. Texas, wild and grim, proffered its horny hand. The large-lunged West, out from his giant breast, yelled its frank welcome, and from main to main, jubilant to the sky, thundered the mighty cry, "Honor to Cain!" In vain beneath his feet we flung the reddening roses, all in vain we poured the golden wine, and round the shining board sent the toast circling, till the rafters rung with the thrice-tripled honors of the feast. Scarce the buds wilted and the voices ceased ere the pure light that sparkled in his eyes, bright as auroral fires in southern skies, faded and faded, and the brave young heart that the relentless Arctic winds had robbed of all its vital heat, in that long quest for the lost captain, now within his breast more and more faintly throbbed. His was the victory, but as his grasp closed on the laurel crown with eager clasp, death launched a whistling dart, and ere the thunders of applause were done, his bright eyes closed for ever on the sun. Too late, too late the splendid prize he won in the Olympic race of science and of art. Like to some shattered berg that, pale and lone, drifts from the white north to a tropic zone, and in the burning day wastes peak by peak away, till on some rosy even it dies with sunlight blessing it. So he tranquilly floated to a southern sea, and melted into heaven. He needs no tears who lived a noble life. We will not weep for him who died so well, but we will gather round the hearth, and tell the story of his strife. Such homage suits him well, better than a funeral pomp or passing bell. What tale of peril and self-sacrifice! Prisoned amid the fastness of ice, with hunger howling o'er the wastes of snow, night lengthening into months, the ravenous floe crunching the massive ships, as the white bear crunches his prey. The insufficient share of loathsome food, the lethargy of famine, the despair urging to labor, nervelessly pursued, toil done with skinny arms, and faces hued like pallid masks, while dolefully behind glimmered the fading embers of a mind. That awful hour, when through the prostrate band delirium stalked, laying his burning hand upon the ghastly foreheads of the crew, the whispers of rebellion, faint and few at first, but deepening ever till they grew into black thoughts of murder. Such the throng of horrors found the hero. High the song should be that hymns the noble part he played, sinking himself, yet ministering aid to all around him. By a mighty will living defiant of the wants that kill, because his death would seal his comrade's fate. Cheering with ceaseless and inventive skill those polar waters, dark and desolate. Equal to every trial, every fate he stands until spring, tardy with relief, unlocks the icy gate, and the pale prisoners thread the world once more to the steep cliffs of Greenland's pastoral shore, bearing their dying chief. Time was when he should gain his spurs of gold from royal hands who wooed the knightly state. The knell of old formalities is tolled, and the world's knights are now self-consecrate. No grander episode doth chivalry hold in all its annals back to Charlemagne than that lone vigil of unceasing gain, faithfully kept through hunger and through cold by the good Christian knight Elisha Kane. Fitzjames O'Brien. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. End of The World's Best Poetry, Volume 7, Descriptive and Narrative, Part 1.